Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
After the main character dies, he wakes up inside of Twilight and he realizes he has every single grimoire from the anime Black Clover. What will he do inside of Twilight with every single grimoire from Black Clover?
Twilight, what if I have all grimoires from Black Clover? Chapter 1, Waking After Impact. I died in pieces. The first impact was a book. It slipped from a high shelf, corner first, and struck the top of my head while I was bent over. I remember the dull sound, the way my vision snapped white, and my knees gave out. I fell forward, out of the store, through the open doorway, into the street. A truck horn blared. I didn't turn fast enough. The truck hit me and lifted me clean off the ground. I went over the bridge railing, felt the air tear past my face, then the water swallowed me. I sank. Something big moved below. Then another shape. Teeth closed in. There was no pain that lasted. Just pressure, then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on a polished wooden floor. I blinked once. Then twice. The ceiling above me was white, smooth, and fitted with studio lights. The air smelled faintly of dust and metal. My body felt whole. No pain. No lingering sensation of injury. I sat up without effort and looked down at my hands. They were steady. I flexed my fingers and felt strength respond easily. I breathed in and out, calm. Inside me, something stirred. I didn't panic. I focused inward, the way I always did when checking my own state. What I felt wasn't subtle. It was layered. Heavy. Structured. Ordered. Grimoires. Not one. Every single grimoire from Black Clover. All of them existed within me at once, distinct but accessible. I knew their functions immediately. I knew their limits. I knew how they interacted. The knowledge sat cleanly in my mind without confusion. I let out a short breath and smiled a little. That's convenient. I stood and took in the room properly. It was a dance studio. Full-length mirrors lined one wall. A rack of speakers and cables sat near the corner. Large windows let in pale daylight. Movement caught my attention. Two people stood frozen near the far wall. A tall man with sandy hair and sharp features stared at me with narrowed eyes. His posture was aggressive even while still. Next to him was a human girl with brown hair pulled back loosely. Her heartbeat was fast. Her breathing shallow. James. Bella Swan. I recognized them instantly. I also knew exactly where in the timeline this was. The ballet studio. The trap. Bella was supposed to be alone. She wasn't supposed to survive this encounter without Edward arriving in time. James tilted his head slightly, studying me. His smile was thin and predatory. Bella looked confused, her eyes darting between us. "Who are you?" James asked casually. I brushed dust off my shirt and turned fully toward them. "Just someone who woke up in the wrong room," I said cheerfully. Bella took a small step back, her hand trembling. "James." He didn't look at her. His attention stayed on me. "You're human," he said. "But you don't smell afraid." I shrugged lightly. I usually don't take things too seriously. That was enough for him. He moved. James crossed the distance in an instant, his body blurring with speed meant to kill. I didn't rush. I didn't overthink it. I stepped forward and met him halfway. I reinforced my body with layered magic. No flash. No spectacle. Just function. When his hand reached for my throat, I caught his wrist easily. The force of his momentum stopped dead. The floor creaked under our feet. James's eyes widened slightly. I twisted and redirected, using his own speed against him. His body slammed into the mirrored wall. Glass cracked but didn't shatter. He recovered fast, flipping back to his feet with a snarl. Bella gasped and pressed herself against the wall, her eyes wide. James attacked again, faster, more aggressive. I blocked each strike cleanly. My movements were precise. No wasted motion. When he tried to circle behind me, I stepped into his space and drove my elbow into his chest. There was a sharp sound. His ribs collapsed inward. He flew backward and hit the floor hard, sliding several feet. He didn't get back up. The studio went quiet except for Bella's breathing. I relaxed my stance and looked down at James. He was immobilized, his body already struggling to heal from damage far beyond what he expected from a human. I hadn't used lethal force. I didn't need to. Bella stared at me like she couldn't reconcile what she'd just seen. You just... Footsteps thundered from outside. The windows shattered inward as figures burst through. Edward arrived first, eyes wild, posture rigid with fear and rage. Emmett and Jasper followed, then Alice and Carlisle. They took in the scene in seconds, Bella unharmed, James broken on the floor, me standing between them. Edward moved instantly to Bella's side, gripping her shoulders and scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "I'm okay," Bella said quickly, still staring at me. He stopped him. Edward's eyes snapped to me. His expression was tense, guarded. He didn't attack. He assessed. Carlisle stepped forward calmly, his gaze analytical. "Thank you," he said. "You intervened at great risk to yourself." I waved it off. It was fine. Emmett looked impressed. "That guy's human." Jasper frowned slightly, sensing the room. "Something's off." Edward studied me harder, trying to read my thoughts. His brow creased in confusion. I smiled at him. "You won't get much," I said lightly. He stiffened but didn't respond verbally. Alice tilted her head, her expression puzzled. "I didn't see you here." "That happens," I replied. Carlisle nodded once. "James needs to be dealt with. We'll handle it." The Cullens moved efficiently. Emmett and Jasper restrained James completely. Edward stayed close to Bella, one arm around her shoulders. Bella finally found her voice again. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my life." I met her eyes and nodded. "You're welcome." We left the studio together. The Cullens moved fast but controlled, keeping Bella shielded. I stayed alongside without trouble. No one tried to stop me. Forks was quiet when we arrived. The house was warm and orderly. Bella sat on the couch while Carlisle checked her vitals out of habit. Edward hovered, tense but relieved. Esme brought a blanket and draped it around Bella's shoulders. "We're very grateful," she said to me sincerely. "You protected our family." I smiled. "Happy to help." Edward finally spoke directly to me. "You're not normal." I shrugged again. "Most people aren't." There was no hostility in the room. Just curiosity, caution, and relief. Bella looked between us. "Are you staying?" she asked. "For a bit," I said. She smiled faintly, exhaustion catching up to her. The night settled without drama. James was gone. Bella was safe. The timeline had shifted, but no one commented on it. I leaned back in my chair, relaxed, aware of every grimoire resting quietly within me, waiting. Chapter 2, Quiet Days in Forks. I stayed. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because Bella looked like she was trying to hold herself together with habits and stubbornness. She sat on the Cullen couch with that blanket still around her shoulders, hands tucked close like she didn't know what to do with them. Edward stayed near her, too still, like he was bracing for something that had already passed. Carlyle finished his careful check, even though he already knew what he would find. No bruising, he said calmly. No concussion symptoms. You're exhausted, but physically you're all right. Bella let out a breath that sounded like it had been caught in her chest for a while. Okay, she said quietly. Esme touched Bella's hair lightly, then pulled her hand back the moment she realized she was doing it, as if she didn't want to crowd her. You can stay here tonight, Esme said gently. If you want. Bella looked at Edward first. Edward's jaw tightened, then he nodded. Please. Bella nodded too, small and careful. Yeah. I'd like that. Emmett leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, watching me openly, not trying to hide that he was curious. So, he said in a friendly tone, what's your name? I smiled. Call me. I paused for half a second, choosing something simple and usable. Kai. Edward's eyes flicked to my face. I could tell he was still trying, still pushing at my mind the way he always did when he wanted certainty. He wasn't getting it. I wasn't doing anything dramatic about it, either. I wasn't trying to make a point. My mind was simply structured differently. Too many layers. Too many doors. Where are you from? Esme asked kindly. Not far, I said lightly. I move around. Alice drifted closer, studying my posture, my expression, like she was trying to fit me into a pattern that wasn't cooperating. You're very calm, she said with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm usually like that, I replied cheerfully. Unless someone's about to die. Edward's head turned sharply at that. Bella's fingers tightened on the blanket. Carlyle's voice stayed even. You understood what James was. You fought him with skill I wouldn't expect from a human. I shrugged, keeping it casual. I've been in weird situations. Jasper's gaze was steady, his expression guarded. You didn't smell afraid, but you weren't excited either, he said in a controlled tone. I don't really get excited about strangers trying to kill someone, I said. It's not fun. Emmett chuckled under his breath. Rosalie, who had been watching from the staircase with an unreadable expression, finally spoke. You're staying here, she said flatly. It wasn't a question. Esme gave her a warning look, but Rosalie didn't flinch. I lifted my hands slightly, palms out, like I was easing tension in a room full of loaded weapons. Only if it's not a problem, I said pleasantly. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. Too late. Edward's voice was sharp, though he kept it controlled. Rosalie. She looked away, irritated, but she stopped. Carlyle glanced at Esme, then back at me. You can stay in the guest room, he offered. For a few days. We can talk in the morning. Tonight, Bella needs rest, and we all need time to settle. Bella's eyes flicked to me again. She looked like she wanted to ask a dozen questions and didn't know how to start. Thank you, she said softly. I nodded at her. You're welcome. Edward's hand stayed on Bella's shoulder. His fingers were careful, like he was constantly checking that she was still there. The way he looked at her made it obvious that he was blaming himself, even though he hadn't been the one who set the trap. That was just Edward. I didn't comment. I didn't try to fix him with words. I had full knowledge of who he was at this point in time, and I wasn't about to try to force him into a calmer shape. Esme showed me the guest room upstairs. It was neat and warm, with a plain bedspread and a window facing the dark trees. The house was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Even Emmett's casual energy didn't disrupt it much. Esme lingered at the doorway. If you need anything, please ask, she said sincerely. And, thank you again. I know you didn't have to step in. I did, I said simply, still cheerful. It was right there. She nodded, then left me alone. I sat on the bed and leaned back, hands braced behind me. I let my awareness drop inward again, not because I was worried, but because I liked knowing what I had. Every grimoire. Every system. Every style. It didn't feel like noise. It felt like a library where every book was already open to the exact page I needed. I was careful not to use anything in a way that would leave obvious marks. This world didn't have mana. It didn't have magic circles in the air as a normal part of life. If I did something flashy, I would force explanations nobody here could make without panic. I didn't need to. I exhaled quietly, stood, and went to the window. The forest outside was dark. Forks always looked damp even when it wasn't raining. The tree line swallowed light. Downstairs, I could hear Bella's footsteps as she moved toward the room Esme had prepared. Edward's steps followed at a careful distance. I stayed in my room and didn't interfere. The next morning, the Cullen house felt like a different place. The tension was still there, but it was organized now, controlled. Carlyle moved through the kitchen like a doctor on a normal shift. Esme had food ready for Bella, who sat at the table looking tired but more stable. Edward stood close to her, leaning against the counter, gaze flicking between Bella and the windows like he was still scanning for threats. Alice sat perched on a chair, legs tucked up, expression thoughtful. Jasper stood behind her with his arms crossed, relaxed in posture but alert in the eyes. Emmett and Rosalie were together near the sink. Emmett looked like he wanted to talk. Rosalie looked like she wanted to leave. Bella looked up when I walked in. "Hi," she said quietly. "Morning," I replied happily. Edward's eyes tracked me immediately, sharp and focused. "You slept?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm good at that." Emmett grinned. "That's rare around here." Bella blinked at that, then gave a small, uncertain smile. Esme slid a plate toward Bella. "Eat," she said gently. Bella picked at the food at first, then took a real bite like she was reminding herself she still could. Carlyle looked at me across the table. "We should talk," he said evenly. "But it doesn't need to be intense." "Works for me," I said, still casual. Edward's tone was restrained but direct. "What are you?" Bella stiffened a little, and Esme's eyes flicked to Edward with quiet warning. I kept my expression light. "A person," I said. "With good reflexes." "That isn't an answer," Edward replied, his voice tight. "I know," I said cheerfully. "But it's the one you're getting." Emmett let out a low laugh. Jasper's gaze sharpened a fraction. Alice's mouth curved into a small smile, like she found the exchange interesting. Carlyle lifted a hand slightly, calming without forcing. "Edward," he said gently. Edward's jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. Bella looked between us. "I don't really care what he is," she said quietly, then cleared her throat like she hadn't meant to sound so firm. "He saved me." Edward's expression softened for a second when he looked at her. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why he's still here." Rosalie made a sound under her breath, irritated. I leaned back in my chair and gave Bella a friendly nod. "Thanks." Bella looked embarrassed and dropped her gaze to her plate. Carlyle turned his attention to me again. "Do you have somewhere you need to be?" he asked calmly. "No," I said. "I can stay a few days. I'll keep things quiet." Edward's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're planning to stay in Forks?" "Yeah," I said. "I like the weather. It matches my attitude." Emmett laughed out loud at that. Bella's lips twitched like she was trying not to smile. Esme looked relieved by the lighter tone, even if she didn't fully trust it yet. Carlyle nodded. All right. Bella, we should talk about the best way to handle school. We need normal routines. Bella's shoulders tensed. I'm supposed to go today, she said hesitantly. Edward immediately shook his head. No. Bella frowned. Edward. It's not safe, he said firmly, trying to keep his voice gentle and failing. Carlyle's tone stayed calm. James is gone, he said. And we're taking precautions. Bella can't stay isolated forever. Edward's hands clenched and relaxed. He didn't argue with Carlyle the way he might have argued with anyone else. Bella looked at me, hesitant. Are you going to be around? I shrugged lightly. If you want me to. Edward's gaze snapped to her. Bella held his look without backing down, which told me she was already in that stubborn phase where she'd dig in if she felt controlled. Alice leaned forward slightly, eyes bright. You should come, she said quickly, like it was obvious. If you're staying in Forks, you might as well see the local chaos. School chaos? I said, amused. Yes, Alice replied with certainty. Emmett added, it'll be fun. Rosalie rolled her eyes. Jasper finally spoke, voice low and measured. If he's with us, it's easier to keep track of him. I smiled. I'm right here, you know. Jasper didn't react, just kept the same calm stare. Edward's voice was quiet but edged. Fine, he said. But you stay close. I lifted my hands in surrender. Sure. Bella exhaled like she'd been holding tension in her chest, and her shoulders loosened slightly. A little later, Edward drove Bella to the Swan house so she could change and get her things. I went with them, mostly because Edward looked like he wasn't going to let me out of his sight anyway. The ride was quiet at first. Bella sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap. Edward's grip on the steering wheel was tight. I sat in the back seat, relaxed, watching the trees blur past. Bella glanced at me in the rearview mirror, then looked away. So. Kai, she said softly. Are you staying with the Cullens? For now, I replied easily. Edward's eyes flicked to the mirror too. Why? He asked bluntly. Because you're all stressed, I said. And Bella could have died yesterday. Bella's face tightened at the reminder, but she didn't look away. Edward's jaw clenched. She won't, he said, almost like he was talking to himself. I kept my tone light, but my attention sharpened. Good, I said. Keep it that way. Edward looked at me sharply for half a second, then back to the road. Bella swallowed and stared out the window. At the Swan house, Charlie wasn't home. That matched what I remembered. Bella moved quickly, heading upstairs for a change of clothes and her bag. Edward stood in the living room like he didn't want to touch anything human. His posture was tense, gaze scanning even though the house was quiet. I leaned against the wall, hands in my pockets, and looked around. It felt normal in a way the Cullen house didn't. Slight clutter. Faint smell of coffee. A stack of papers on the counter. Edward finally spoke again, voice low. You knew James was dangerous. Yeah, I said simply. How? He asked, still controlled, but the question had weight behind it. I shrugged. I've seen things like him. Edward studied my face. You're hiding something. Yep, I said cheerfully. His expression tightened. I held his gaze, still smiling, but with enough calm that he didn't push harder in that moment. Edward was intense, but he wasn't reckless when Bella might overhear something that would scare her. Bella came back downstairs with a backpack and a fresh shirt. She looked a little more like herself, though her eyes still carried fatigue. Edward's expression softened immediately when he looked at her. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Bella nodded. On the drive to Forks High School, the sky stayed grey and low. The school building came into view like it always did in this place, practical and plain, surrounded by wet pavement and parked cars. I stepped out of the car and glanced around, absorbing the scene. Students moved in groups. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. Nothing here looked like it mattered, which was always the trick. Little places like this were where problems hid behind routine. Bella walked beside Edward, shoulders slightly hunched. I stayed on the other side of her, casual, hands loose, not crowding her. Edward's eyes scanned constantly, not for humans, but for anything that didn't belong. We walked into the main building, and the familiar noise hit. Lockers. Footsteps. Voices. The normal rush of a school day. Jessica Stanley spotted Bella immediately. Her eyes widened, and she hurried over with a mix of concern and gossip ready to spill out. "Bella," Jessica said, loud enough to draw attention. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" we heard. Bella flinched slightly. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Mike Newton appeared behind Jessica, eyes wide and worried. "Bella, I heard you were in Phoenix," he said, voice tense. And then something happened. Bella's face tightened. It's fine," she repeated, clearly not wanting to explain. Jessica's gaze flicked to Edward, then to me. "Who's that?" she asked, curiosity sharpening. I smiled at her. "Kai." Jessica blinked, then brightened like she was collecting information. "Are you new?" "Kind of," I said easily. Mike looked at me with immediate suspicion, the way he did with any male near Bella. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Not far," I said again, keeping it vague. Edward's expression stayed cold. He didn't acknowledge Mike directly, which only made Mike's jaw tighten. Bella shifted slightly, her shoulders tense. I could tell she didn't want people circling her with questions right now. I stepped a half step forward, still casual, and spoke lightly. "Bella's tired. Let her breathe." Jessica's eyes widened a fraction, then she forced a smile. "Right. Yeah. Sorry." Mike looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it when Edward's gaze finally landed on him like a warning. Angela Weber approached more slowly, her expression genuinely concerned, not excited. "Bella," she said softly. "I'm glad you're okay." Bella's face softened. "Thanks, Angela." Angela glanced at me, polite. "Hi." "Hi," I said pleasantly. The bell rang, and the group broke apart. Bella moved toward her first class. Edward walked with her, and I stayed alongside, like it was the most normal thing in the world for someone to appear after a near-death situation and just slide into the day. In the hallway, Tyler Crowley slowed as we passed, looking awkward. His eyes flicked to Bella like he wanted to say something, then he didn't. Bella kept her gaze forward. Edward's hand hovered near Bella's elbow without touching, like he was fighting the impulse to physically shield her from everything. I kept my pace easy. "You okay?" I asked Bella quietly. Bella nodded quickly. "Yeah," she said, but her voice was thin. Edward's eyes narrowed slightly, annoyed at her for lying, but he didn't call her out. In biology, Mr. Banner droned on like always. Bella sat at her usual table. Edward sat beside her, posture stiff, gaze flicking to every sound. I took a seat a row behind them. It felt strange sitting in a classroom again with the full weight of what I carried inside me. Not in a dramatic way. Just in a practical way, like having a weapon and choosing not to pull it out. Bella kept her eyes on her notes, but her fingers fidgeted with her pen. Edward's hand rested on the edge of the desk, still. Halfway through class, Bella's breathing shifted. Just a little. Like a memory hit her without warning. Edward noticed instantly. He turned slightly, his voice low. "Bella," he said gently. Bella swallowed. "I'm fine," she whispered. Edward's eyes softened, but he didn't believe her. He didn't press, though. He just stayed close, steady. My expression stayed relaxed, but I watched them with quiet attention. They were locked into their pattern, intense and fragile, like always at this stage. After class, we headed to lunch. The cafeteria smelled like fried food and damp clothes. Bella moved with hesitation, like she didn't want to be seen. Edward guided her toward the Cullen table by instinct. Alice spotted me and Bella at the same time. She waved brightly, her energy sharp and light. "Bella," she called happily, then looked at me. "Kai." I raised a hand in a casual wave. Bella hesitated at the edge of the table. Rosalie's eyes immediately went cold. Jasper's expression stayed neutral. Emmett looked amused. Carlisle wasn't there. Esme wasn't there. It was just the siblings. Edward pulled out Bella's chair for her, careful. Bella sat, cheeks faintly pink, and looked down. Alice smiled at Bella. "I'm so glad you're back," she said brightly. Bella gave a small smile. "Yet." Emmett leaned forward, grinning at me. "So you're really coming to school with us now?" "Looks like it," I said lightly. Rosalie's gaze flicked over me like she was looking for flaws. "This is a bad idea," she said flatly. Alice's smile tightened. "Rosalie," she said in a warning tone. Rosalie didn't back down. "You're inviting trouble." I didn't react offensively. I kept it calm. "I get it," I said. "You don't know me." Rosalie's eyes narrowed further. "No, we don't." Emmett sighed dramatically. "Can we not do this at lunch?" Jasper spoke quietly, tone even. "Rosalie's not wrong to be cautious." Edward's voice was controlled. "Enough." Bella flinched slightly at the tension, then tried to speak. "It's okay," she said softly. "Kai helped me." Rosalie's eyes flicked to Bella, then away, irritation still sharp but tempered by the fact that Bella was human and fragile. I decided to steer it away from being a whole thing. "So," I said lightly, looking at Emmett, "does Forks High always serve food that looks like it's been sitting out since yesterday?" Emmett's grin widened. "Yes." Alice laughed, quick and bright. Bella's lips twitched, like she wanted to smile but didn't fully let herself. Edward's gaze stayed on Bella more than anyone else. He looked tense, but the tension had shifted from panic to control. Bella finally looked at me directly. "How did you do that?" she asked quietly, careful not to be loud. Edward's head turned sharply. I kept my smile easy. "Practice," I said. Bella blinked. "Practice," she repeated softly, like she didn't know what to do with that answer. Edward's expression tightened. "You're still not answering anything." "I am," I replied cheerfully. "Just not the way you want." Alice leaned closer, eyes bright with interest. "He's fun," she said lightly, as if that settled it. Jasper gave a small exhale, like he was trying to stay patient. Bella took a slow breath, then ate a bite of her lunch. The motion looked deliberate, like she was forcing herself back into routine. I watched her carefully. She was here. She was alive. That was what mattered. The rest of lunch stayed mostly calm. Jessica kept glancing over, clearly trying to figure out why Bella was sitting with the Cullens and some new guy she didn't know. Mike looked annoyed from across the room. Bella didn't engage with them. She stayed tucked into the small safe space she had chosen, and Edward stayed close enough to block the world. When the bell rang again, Bella stood slowly. Edward moved with her. I followed, still casual, still present. In the hallway, Bella's voice was quiet. "Thanks for being normal," she said softly. I smiled at her. "It's easy," I said. "Most things aren't worth panicking over." Edward's gaze flicked to me. "Some things are," he said quietly. I nodded once, the cheerful tone still there, but steadier. "Yeah," I said. "Those are the ones I take seriously." Bella looked between us, then let out a small breath like she was relieved we weren't going to argue. We kept walking through the crowded hallway, the day moving forward one small piece at a time. Chapter 3, Practical Plans and Quiet Rooms. We got through the rest of the school day without anything exploding. That was not the same thing as calm. It was just the world behaving for a few hours because it did not know it had almost lost Bella Swan in a ballet studio. Between classes, I stayed close without being obvious about it. I kept my hands loose, my pace easy, my expression friendly. Edward moved like a guard dog trying to pretend he was a normal boyfriend. Bella moved like she was trying to convince herself she belonged in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in the classroom, instead of back in that room with mirrors and broken glass. When the final bell rang, Bella looked relieved in a tired way. Edward's posture loosened by a small amount, the way someone relaxes only because they cannot stay tense forever. I walked with them to the parking lot. The air was wet and cold. Students called to each other, laughed, slammed car doors. Jessica watched Bella like she was gathering details for a story she would tell a dozen times. Mike watched Edward with an unhappy expression. Bella kept her gaze down and walked faster. Edward opened Bella's door for her. "I'll take you home," he said quietly. Bella hesitated. "Charlie's going to ask questions," she said in a careful tone. Edward's jaw flexed. "I know," he said, then forced his voice softer. "We'll handle it." I leaned against the car and smiled lightly. "If you want, I can keep him distracted." Edward's eyes flicked to me, sharp. "No," he said immediately, then caught himself and added, quieter, "Not like that." Bella glanced at Edward, then at me. "It's okay," she said softly. "Charlie doesn't need more weird." "Fair," I replied cheerfully. Edward looked like he wanted to say more, but he held it in. He slid into the driver's seat. Bella buckled in, hands folded in her lap. Edward looked at me through the open window. "You're coming back to the house," he said. It was not a question. I smiled and nodded. "Sure." He drove away, careful and smooth, like every movement mattered. Bella stared out the window, her shoulders still tense. I watched them go, then headed for my own ride. It was one of those small forks things that my brain noted without emotion. I did not have a car waiting for me. I did not have a bag of personal history or a hometown in this world. I had enough magic to solve that in 10 different ways, but I did not want to create problems that could be avoided. So I walked. It took time, and it was quiet, and the damp air settled on my hair and clothes. I did not mind. I kept my pace steady and my attention open. I watched the road and the tree line and the way the clouds stayed low like they always did here. Inside my chest, my power stayed still, layered and ready. I did not call it up. I did not need to. I just liked knowing it was there. When I reached the Cullen house, the driveway was empty except for a few cars. The house looked the same as it had the night before, clean and expensive and calm like it was set apart from the town on purpose. I stepped inside without knocking. The air inside was warmer, still and quiet, with faint smells that humans would not notice much. Bella's scent was still there, stronger now because she had been sitting and breathing and existing in their space all day. Edward met me in the entryway. He looked composed on the surface, but his eyes were tight. His body was too still. That was always how he looked when he was trying to hold down panic. "Carlyle wants to talk," Edward said. "Cool," I replied easily. "Do you want a snack first?" His expression did not change. I raised my eyebrows and smiled wider. That was a joke. Edward's gaze stayed on my face like he was trying to decide if I was making fun of him or just being like this naturally. "I don't trust you," he said quietly. I nodded. "That makes sense." He frowned, like the lack of argument annoyed him. We walked into the living room. Carlyle was there, sitting on one of the chairs with his hands folded loosely. Esme stood near the window, watching the trees. Alice sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her. Jasper leaned against the wall. Emmett sat slouched in a chair, looking bored in a friendly way. Rosalie was not in the room, which told me she had chosen to remove herself rather than sit through anything involving me. Bella was curled up on the couch with a blanket again, her knees pulled in slightly. She looked tired but cleaner now, less like she might fall apart in the next second. When she saw me, her face softened a little. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied happily. "How's the non-dying going?" Bella blinked, then gave a small smile that looked guilty, like she was not sure she was allowed to find anything funny right now. "It's fine," she said. Edward moved to stand behind the couch, close to Bella. His hand hovered near her shoulder again without touching until Bella leaned back slightly, and then he let his fingers rest there lightly. Carlyle's voice was calm. "Thank you for coming back," he said. I shrugged. "You offered a bed." Emmett grinned. "And our charming company." Alice smiled like she agreed. Jasper's expression did not change. Carlyle looked at me steadily. "I'm not going to demand answers you don't want to give," he said evenly. "But I do need to understand what your presence means for Bella's safety." Edward's hand on Bella's shoulder tightened for a moment. Bella looked down, listening. I kept my posture relaxed. "My presence means I'm here," I said. Edward's jaw tightened. "That's not." Carlyle lifted a hand gently. Edward stopped. I looked at Carlyle. "You want practical," I said. "Not details." Carlyle nodded once. "Yes." I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on my knees. "Okay," I said. "You already know most threats to Bella are not human. People like James. People like the ones who travel with him. That's the big issue." Bella's eyes flicked up quickly, then down again. Edward's expression sharpened. Jasper's eyes narrowed slightly, attentive. Carlyle stayed calm. "Continue." "Bella needs layers," I said simply. "Not one person guarding her. Not just Edward hovering. Routines. Redundancies. Clear lines for what happens if something goes wrong." Edward's voice was tight. "Nothing is going to happen." I kept my tone easy, but my attention sharpened. "James happened," I said. "Victoria exists. That's not a guess." The room went still. Edward's head snapped toward me, his eyes hard. Alice's smile vanished. Jasper's posture tightened subtly. Emmett sat up straighter. Bella froze, her breathing shallow. Carlyle did not react outwardly, but his eyes sharpened. "You know her name," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yet." Edward's voice was low. "How?" I smiled faintly, like I did not care about the pressure. "I know things," I said. "That's all you get." Bella swallowed. "Victoria," she whispered, like saying it made it more real. Edward's hand slid from hovering to holding. He gripped Bella's shoulder carefully, not painful, but firm. "Bella," he said softly. Bella shook her head once, like she was trying to shake off the fear. "I'm okay," she said, but her voice wavered. Esme moved closer and sat on the arm of the couch near Bella, a quiet presence. "You're safe here," Esme said gently. I watched Bella's face and kept my voice light, but steady. "You are safe right now," I said. "That's not the same thing as ignoring the problem." Edward looked like he wanted to argue again. Carlyle spoke first. "We have already been considering the remaining members of James's group," Carlyle said calmly. "But your certainty is useful." Alice's eyes were fixed on me. "I still didn't see you," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "That's not your fault." Alice's expression tightened at that, like she did not like being told her limits. Jasper finally spoke, voice low and controlled. "So what layers are you suggesting?" I nodded, glad someone was on the same page. "First," I said, "Bella doesn't go anywhere alone. Not the woods, not the parking lot, not home at night. That's basic." Bella's shoulders tensed. "I don't like that," she said quietly. Edward's eyes softened, but he did not loosen his grip. I looked at Bella gently. "You don't have to like it," I said pleasantly. "You just have to be alive." Bella's lips pressed together. She looked annoyed and scared at the same time, which was exactly how she looked whenever she was being protected against her will. Carlyle nodded. "Reasonable," he said. "Second," I continued, "school routine stays normal as much as possible. Humans notice patterns. If Bella disappears from school, people talk. If she's constantly escorted by a line of people, people talk. So keep it simple. Edward stays close. Alice can rotate in. Even Emmett, if he can pretend to be normal." Emmett put a hand to his chest, offended. "I'm very normal." Alice let out a short laugh, then caught herself, her eyes still tense. Jasper looked at me like he was evaluating whether I was actually helpful or just lucky. "And if she needs to go home?" he asked. "Charlie needs a story that doesn't break Bella," I said. "No weird half-truths that make her look unstable. Keep it consistent. Keep it boring." Bella's face tightened. "Charlie's going to freak out anyway," she said quietly. Esme touched Bella's arm gently. "Charlie loves you," she said softly. "He will be scared, but he will calm down." Bella did not look convinced. "Third," I said, "if anything feels off, you move. No debate. No arguing in the moment. Edward, you're fast, but you're also emotional. You need a simple rule." Edward's eyes narrowed. "I don't need rules." I smiled. "Everyone needs rules," I said cheerfully. "Especially the ones who think they don't." Emmett snorted. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly, the closest thing to amusement he had shown. Edward's jaw flexed, but he did not push. He looked at Bella instead, his expression strained. Carlyle folded his hands, calm as ever. "This is helpful," he said. "But we already do much of this." "Then do it tighter," I said. "Because Victoria isn't going to approach the same way James did. She's not a planner like he was, but she's persistent." Bella's eyes widened slightly at the description. Edward's face went hard. Alice's voice was quiet. "I can't see her clearly," she said, frustrated. "I know," I replied simply. Alice stared at me. "How do you know that?" I shrugged lightly. "Because it's true." Edward's gaze stayed sharp. "You keep saying things you shouldn't know." I smiled like it did not bother me. "And you keep hearing them," I replied. Bella shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. So what happens now? She asked softly. Carlyle answered first, calm and practical. We keep you safe, he said. We keep routines. We watch for anything unusual. Edward and I will talk with Charlie. Bella's shoulders tensed. No, she said quickly. Please don't. Hill. Edward crouched slightly beside the couch so he could look at her face. Bella, he said gently, we have to. Bella swallowed, eyes shiny with stress. He'll blame you, she whispered. Edward's expression tightened with something that looked like guilt. Let him, he said quietly. I can take it. Bella shook her head, frustrated. You don't understand, she said, voice strained. He'll think I don't know. Stupid. I kept my voice light, trying to cut the pressure. Charlie already thinks teenagers are stupid, I said. It's part of being a parent. Bella shot me a look that was half annoyed, half grateful. That's not helpful, she said. It is, I replied cheerfully. It lowers expectations. Emmett laughed. Esme gave me a look like she did not know whether to scold me or thank me for making Bella's breathing steady again. Edward did not laugh, but the tightness in his face eased slightly when Bella's shoulders loosened. Carlyle stood. We'll speak with Charlie this evening, he said calmly. For now, Bella should rest. Kai, if you're staying, you can remain here. I nodded. I'm good. Alice slid off the couch and moved closer to Bella, her expression softening. I can bring you something to wear tomorrow, she said brightly, trying to shift into normal. If you want. Bella looked overwhelmed by the idea but nodded anyway. Okay, she said quietly. Edward's eyes flicked to Alice like he knew what something to wear meant in her mind. He did not object out loud. The room started to break apart into smaller movements. Jasper and Emmett drifted toward the kitchen. Alice disappeared up the stairs. Esme stayed beside Bella, talking softly about nothing serious. Carlyle stepped into his office area, already thinking in problem-solving mode. Edward lingered near Bella, his posture protective. When Bella finally stood, he stood with her instantly. I'm going to lie down, Bella said quietly. Edward nodded. I'll stay near, he said. Bella looked at him with tired irritation. I know, she said. Edward's mouth tightened, then softened. Okay, he said quietly. Bella headed down the hallway to the guest room. Esme followed for a moment, then returned. Edward stayed in the living room, watching the hallway like the walls might open. I walked over and leaned against the wall near him, keeping my posture loose. You look like you're trying to hold your breath forever, I said lightly. Edward did not look at me. I'm fine, he said flatly. That's not true, I replied cheerfully. He finally turned his head slightly, eyes cold. You think this is funny? No, I said, still calm. I think you're going to burn yourself out. Edward's eyes narrowed. I don't care. I kept my voice light but steadier. You do, I said. You care so much it's making you stupid. Edward's expression sharpened. He looked like he wanted to snap back, then he stopped, because part of him knew it was true. He exhaled slowly. I don't know what you are, he said quietly. But you're too comfortable here. I'm comfortable because I'm not here to hurt anyone, I replied. You could, he said. It was not an accusation. It was a fact. I nodded. Sure. Edward's gaze stayed on my face. Why did you step in? I shrugged. Because Bella was going to die, I said simply. His jaw tightened. You said that like it was certain. It was, I replied. Edward looked away again, eyes fixed on nothing. I left, he said quietly, the words stiff. I tried to do the right thing, and it almost killed her. I watched his face, the way he held himself like he deserved pain. I kept my tone light, because that was how I was, but I did not treat it like a joke. You can't undo what happened, I said. You can only do better now. Edward's expression tightened. And you think you can tell me how? I smiled faintly. I think you need someone who isn't scared of you, I said. And I'm not. Edward's eyes flicked to me again, sharp. You should be. I'm not, I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, then his voice dropped. When you said her name, he said quietly, you changed the whole room. Yeah, I said. How many things do you know? He asked. I shrugged. Enough. Edward's gaze hardened again. You're not going to tell me? No, I said, still cheerful. But I'll help you keep Bella alive. That's the part you care about. Edward's throat moved slightly as he swallowed. His eyes flicked down the hallway again. If she gets hurt, he said, voice tight, I will. You'll do something reckless, I finished for him lightly. I know. Edward looked like he hated that I could say it so easily. I pushed off the wall and walked toward the kitchen, keeping my voice casual. Let's make a plan that doesn't rely on you losing control, I said. Jasper and Emmett were there. Emmett was pretending to drink something out of a cup just to have something to do. Jasper's gaze sharpened when he saw Edward enter. Edward stopped in the doorway. We're planning, he said, clipped. Emmett grinned. Finally. Something fun. Jasper's expression stayed controlled. What's the plan? I leaned on the counter. Simple rotation, I said. Edward stays close at school. Alice watches future shifts she can see. Jasper watches emotional shifts in crowds. Emmett stays ready for physical response. Carlisle coordinates. Esme keeps Bella calm. Rosalie. Emmett coughed. Rosalie does not do teamwork right now. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly again. Edward's voice was tight. Rosalie isn't the priority. Jasper nodded once. And Kai, he asked, looking at me. Where do you fit? I smiled. I'm a backstop, I said. If something gets through, I stop it. Edward's eyes narrowed. I don't like relying on you. You won't be relying on me, I replied cheerfully. You'll be relying on your family. I'm just extra. Jasper studied me, then nodded slightly, like he could accept extra as long as it reduced risk. Emmett leaned forward. What about Charlie? He asked. Edward's face tightened. Carlisle is handling that, he said. I nodded. Charlie needs a consistent story, I said. Not a detailed one. Bella was attacked, she got away, the police are involved, the Cullens helped. Keep it boring. Edward's eyes flicked to me again. Police, he said, voice edged. Yeah, I replied. It's a human town. Humans handle things with paperwork. Emmett chuckled. Jasper's gaze stayed serious. And Victoria, he said. If she comes. She won't charge the front door, I said. She'll watch. She'll wait. She'll look for gaps. Edward's posture tightened again. Then there won't be gaps. I nodded, still calm. That's the goal, I said. Alice appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression bright but tense underneath. Bella's lying down, she said quickly. She's trying not to cry. Edward's face tightened immediately. He moved toward the hallway. I caught his attention with a small tilt of my head. Give her a minute, I said quietly. Edward stopped, jaw clenched. Alice's eyes flicked between us, curious. Edward's voice was quiet and strained. I can hear her heart. I know, I said. That's why you need to let her breathe without you hovering right over her. Edward looked like he wanted to argue, then he exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stand still. Alice watched him carefully, then nodded like she approved. Jasper's voice was low. He's right, he said to Edward. You're pressing. Edward's eyes flashed, then he looked away. I kept my tone light, trying to soften the moment. Go stand near the door instead, I said. It's like hovering, but less annoying. Emmett laughed. Alice smiled quickly. Edward gave me a look that should have been threatening, but it mostly looked tired. He walked down the hall and stopped near Bella's door, far enough back to give her space. We stayed in the kitchen a while, talking through small details in a way that felt almost normal, if you ignored the fact that half the people in the room could tear a car in half with their hands. We kept it practical. Who would be where? Who would watch what? How to move Bella without making her feel trapped? How to keep Charlie from being completely shut out? How to avoid drawing attention at school? I did not talk about my past. I did not talk about dying. I did not talk about grimoires or magic. I kept my role simple, extra set of eyes, extra capacity to stop something violent fast. Later, when the house quieted again, Bella came out of the guest room slowly, blanket still around her shoulders. Her eyes were tired, but she looked steadier. Edward moved instantly, then stopped himself, keeping the distance we had talked about. Are you okay? He asked softly. Bella nodded. Yeah, she said, then glanced at me. Are you still here? I smiled. Yep, I said. Not going anywhere tonight? Bella let out a small breath that looked like relief, then she looked embarrassed about it and stared at the floor. Thanks, she said quietly. Edward's expression softened in a way that was almost painful to watch, because it was so tied up with guilt. Carlyle appeared near the stairs, calm and organized. I'll go speak to Charlie soon, he said gently. Edward, I'd like you with me. Edward's posture tightened. He'll hate me, he said quietly. Carlyle's voice stayed even. He'll be frightened, he corrected. And he'll need answers. Bella's eyes widened slightly. You're going now? She asked. Carlyle nodded. Yes. Bella swallowed. Okay, she whispered, not looking happy about it. Edward looked at her, his expression soft. I'll be back, he said quietly. Bella nodded again, gripping her blanket. Edward turned, then looked at me one more time, his eyes sharp. Stay, he said. I gave him a lazy salute. Got it. Edward and Carlyle left together. The house felt quieter without Carlyle's presence. Esme sat with Bella in the living room, speaking softly, asking gentle questions that Bella answered in short phrases. Alice drifted in and out, occasionally offering Bella something small and normal, like a magazine, like a distraction. Jasper stayed near the back of the room, a calm shadow. Emmett sat in an armchair and watched Bella with a strange kind of carefulness, like he was trying to be less loud on purpose. Bella finally looked at me again, her voice small. So you're really just helping, she said quietly. I smiled. Yeah, I said. I'm not doing anything else. Bella's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious in her human way. Why? She asked. I kept it simple. Because you matter to them, I said. And I don't like watching people get hurt. Bella stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly like she could accept that answer without fully trusting it. Esme's expression softened. Jasper's gaze stayed steady, as if he was measuring the truth in my tone, and for once he did not look displeased. We stayed like that for a while, in a quiet room with the rain tapping against the windows, Bella breathing steadily, and the rest of the house waiting for Edward and Carlisle to come back with whatever Charlie would say. Chapter 4, Rain, Rules and Small Talks. The rain kept tapping the windows like it had nowhere else to be. Bella stayed on the couch with the blanket pulled up to her chest. She was trying to look calm, but her fingers kept tightening and loosening against the fabric. Esme sat close enough that Bella could lean into her if she wanted, but she did not push. She just stayed there, steady and quiet, like a warm lamp left on in a room. Alice wandered in and out of the living room with restless energy. When she was gone, I could hear her upstairs, light steps moving fast, then stopping, then moving again. Jasper stayed near the back of the room, leaning against the wall. He looked relaxed, but his eyes never stopped scanning. Emmett had tried to make the mood lighter earlier and got shut down by Rosalie's absence and Edward's tension. Now he sat in an armchair with his head tilted back, looking bored, but I could tell he was listening to everything anyway. Bella's gaze flicked to the front door every few minutes. "They'll come back," Esme said softly. Bella swallowed. "I know," she replied quietly, but her voice did not sound sure. I sat in one of the chairs across from her, posture loose, hands resting on my knees. I kept my face open and friendly. I did not want Bella feeling like she was surrounded by silent statues. That would make her spiral, and I could see she was close to it. "So," I said lightly, "do you always handle stress by staring at doors?" Bella blinked at me, then her cheeks colored faintly. "I'm not staring," she said, a little defensive. Esme's lips curved into a small smile. "You're staring," I said happily. "It's fine. I do it too sometimes." Bella's eyes narrowed. "You don't seem stressed," she said. "I'm not," I replied easily. "Not right now." Jasper's gaze shifted to me. "You weren't earlier either," he said in a low, controlled tone. I glanced at him. "Earlier someone tried to kill her," I said. "That's a real problem. Sitting in a nice house while the rain does rain stuff isn't." Bella's mouth tightened at the reminder, but she didn't look away. Esme rubbed Bella's shoulder gently, a small motion, then stopped when Bella stiffened. "It's all right," Esme said softly. Bella gave a short nod, then asked in a quiet voice, "Do you think Charlie is going to be mad?" Emmett's eyebrows lifted. Jasper stayed still. Esme's expression softened with sympathy. I answered before anyone else could make it too heavy. "Charlie will be mad because he's scared," I said calmly. "He'll probably blame Edward because it's easier than blaming the world." Bella's eyes flickered with worry. "Edward will take it," she whispered. Jasper's gaze flicked down the hallway toward Bella's guest room, like he could picture Edward standing near that door earlier. Esme's voice was gentle. "Edward has been blamed before," she said. Bella looked down at her hands. "That doesn't make it okay," she said, her voice small. I leaned back in my chair slightly, keeping my tone easy. "No," I said. "But it means it won't break him." Bella's eyes lifted quickly. "You don't know that," she said, not sharp, but not soft either. I smiled faintly. "I know what he's like," I said. Bella stared at me for a moment, then looked away again. I could see the question in her face, the one she would not say out loud. "How?" She didn't ask. That was Bella. She swallowed questions until they sat heavy in her chest. The house stayed quiet. The only real sound was the rain and the occasional shift of someone's weight. Eventually Alice appeared in the living room again, wearing a different outfit than she'd had an hour ago. She moved quickly, then stopped when she saw Bella watching her. "What?" Bella asked quietly. Alice smiled brightly, too bright for the tension in the room. Nothing, she said quickly. Bella's eyes narrowed slightly. You changed again, she said. Alice waved it off. I was bored, she said lightly, then looked at me. Do you want to see my closet? I blinked once, then laughed softly. No, I said happily. I like living. Emmett chuckled. Jasper's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Alice's eyes widened in playful offense. I'm not scary, she said. You are, I replied casually. You're just nice about it. Alice stared at me, then her smile turned more real. Fine, she said, then she looked at Jasper as if checking something. Jasper's scary too. Jasper didn't react, but his eyes shifted to Alice with a patient look. Bella watched the exchange, her shoulders lowering just a little. The normal tone helped. She needed normal. Alice's gaze kept flicking toward the windows and then back to Bella, like she was trying to be present but couldn't stop checking something that wasn't giving her answers. I stood slowly, stretching my arms once. I'm going to walk around, I said lightly. Staying in one spot makes me feel like furniture. Esme nodded. Of course, she said gently. Bella glanced at me. You're not leaving, she said quietly, the words coming out like they surprised her. I smiled at her. Not leaving, I said. Just moving. Bella's mouth tightened like she wanted to hide how relieved she felt. She nodded once. I walked toward the hallway, then paused near Jasper. You, I said, tilting my head. Jasper's eyes narrowed slightly. Me, he replied evenly. Come with me, I said cheerfully. I want to ask something. Jasper studied me for a moment, then pushed off the wall and followed without a word. Alice appeared at Jasper's side immediately. I'm coming too, she said quickly. Jasper sighed quietly, the smallest sound. Of course you are, he said in a low tone. We moved into a quieter part of the house, away from Bella, away from Esme's soft voice. The hallway lights were warm. The house smelled clean, like wood and fabric and something faintly floral from Esme's choices. We stopped near the kitchen area where the sound of rain was muted. I turned to face them both. Okay, I said, still casual. Tell me what you can track and what you can't. Simple version. Alice's expression sharpened immediately. Why? She asked, suspicious but not hostile. Because if we're doing safety, I said, I want to know what gaps exist. Jasper's gaze stayed steady. Edward asked you to stay, he said quietly. That doesn't make you part of our decision-making. I smiled. True, I said happily. But it does make me part of the situation. Alice crossed her arms, then uncrossed them, then crossed them again, restless. I can see choices, she said quickly. People make a decision, and the future shifts. It's clearer when someone is committed. I nodded. And it's worse when someone isn't committed, I said. Alice's eyes narrowed. Yes, she said. Jasper spoke in his low tone. And your interest, he said, is Victoria. I kept my voice light. Among other things, I said. Alice's face tightened. I can't see her well, she admitted, annoyed. It's fuzzy. It's like she's always changing her mind. That fits, I said. Alice frowned. How would you know what fits? I shrugged. Because I pay attention. Jasper watched me, clearly not buying that fully, but he didn't push. I leaned back against the counter. So you can't predict her clearly, I said. What can you do? Can you see if Bella walks into the woods alone? Alice's expression shifted into something more confident. Yes, she said quickly. If Bella decides something, I see it. If Edward decides to do something, I see it. If someone is set on a plan, it's clear. And if someone is impulsive, I said. Alice's mouth tightened. Then it changes, she said, irritated. It's harder. Jasper finally moved, stepping closer, voice controlled. Alice's visions are not a security system, he said. They're useful, but we don't rely only on them. I nodded. Good, I said. Now you. Jasper's eyes narrowed slightly. Me, he repeated. You feel things, I said. You control things. How far does it go? Alice's expression turned cautious. Jasper's jaw tightened slightly, like he didn't like being asked directly. I sense emotions, Jasper said evenly. In a room. In a crowd. I can influence them. Can you sense intent? I asked. Jasper paused. Not directly, he said. I nodded. Can you sense a predator entering a school? I asked, not because you smell them, but because the crowd changes. Jasper's eyes sharpened slightly. Yes, he said. Fear spreads fast. Confusion too. Human crowds react before they understand why. I smiled. That's useful, I said. Alice leaned forward. You're treating this like a job, she said, a little annoyed. It is, I replied cheerfully. Bella alive is the goal. Jasper's gaze held mine. And what are you? He asked quietly. I smiled, keeping it light. A guy who's good at stopping bad situations, I said. Alice rolled her eyes. That's not an answer, she said. I know, I replied happily. Jasper looked like he wanted to push harder, but then his attention flicked toward the living room. His posture shifted slightly. Bella's heart rate changed, he said quietly. Alice's head tilted, listening. She's anxious, she said quickly. I straightened up. Let's not crowd her, I said, already moving. We walked back toward the living room. The moment we entered, I could see it, Bella's posture had tightened again, and Esme was speaking softly but Bella wasn't responding much. Bella's eyes were fixed on the front door again. Emmett's head turned. They're back, he said. A second later, I heard the car outside. Then the front door opened. Edward entered first. His posture was stiff. Carlyle followed, expression calm but careful. Bella stood immediately, blanket slipping off her shoulders. Edward's gaze snapped to her face, intense and soft at the same time. Charlie, Bella started, her voice tight. Carlyle raised a hand gently. He's shaken, he said evenly. But he's all right. Edward's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to say something and couldn't. Bella's eyes searched Edward's face. What did he say? She asked quietly. Edward spoke, voice controlled, but the words sounded forced. He told me to stay away from you, he said. Bella froze. Her face went pale. Esme moved closer. Bella, she said softly. Bella swallowed hard. And you, she said, looking at Edward, what did you say? Edward's eyes flickered with pain. I didn't argue, he said quietly. I told him I cared about you. Bella's eyes filled slightly, but she blinked fast. He's going to blame you, she whispered. Edward's mouth tightened. I don't care, he said, but it didn't sound true. Carlyle's tone stayed practical. Charlie agreed to let Bella return home tonight, he said. He wants her with him. He's frightened. He's trying to regain control. Bella shook her head once. He's not going to let Edward near me, she said. Edward didn't respond immediately. His hands curled slightly, then relaxed, like he was holding back something sharp. I kept my voice light, trying to relieve pressure without dismissing it. Charlie is a dad, I said. Dads do that. Bella turned toward me, eyes tense. This isn't a joke, she said, her voice tight. I sobered immediately. My smile faded, not into sadness, but into focus. I know, I said evenly. I'm not joking. Bella stared at me, then looked away, breathing shallow. Edward's gaze flicked to me, sharp. He looked like he appreciated the shift, even if he didn't want to. Esme touched Bella's arm gently. We can drive you home, she said softly. We can keep it calm. Bella nodded once, swallowing. Okay, she whispered. Edward moved a step closer, then stopped himself, respecting the space we'd talked about. I'll take you, he said quietly. Bella's eyes lifted to his face. Charlie won't like it, she said. Edward's jaw tightened. He doesn't have to, he said. Carlyle's voice stayed calm. Edward, he said gently. Edward's shoulders tightened, but he didn't argue. He looked down for a moment, then back at Bella. Please, he said quietly. Let me. Bella hesitated, then nodded. Okay, she said softly. Alice stepped forward, voice bright but careful. I'll come too, she said quickly. It'll look normal. Like friends. Bella looked uncertain, but she didn't say no. I raised a hand slightly. I can stay back, I said. Too many people might feel like a swarm. Edward's eyes flicked to me. No, he said quietly. Stay. Bella's gaze shifted to me again. There was a small, reluctant relief in her expression. Yet, she said softly. Stay. I nodded, cheerful again, but toned down. All right, I said. The ride to Charlie's house was careful. Edward drove. Bella sat in the passenger seat, hands tight in her lap. Alice sat behind Bella, leaning forward slightly, eyes flicking around like she was scanning invisible lines. I sat beside Alice, posture relaxed. Edward's grip on the steering wheel was firm. Bella stared out the window most of the way. She kept swallowing like her throat was dry. When we pulled into the driveway, Charlie's house looked the same as before, but the feeling around it had changed. It was still just a small home in a wet town, but now it was filled with a father's fear. Bella's shoulders lifted when she inhaled. He's inside, she said quietly. Edward nodded once. I know, he replied. Bella opened the door and stepped out slowly. Edward moved with her, not touching but close. Alice followed at a normal human pace, forcing herself to move slower than she wanted. I followed, casual. Charlie opened the front door before we reached it. His expression was tense. His eyes went straight to Edward, then to me, then to Alice. Bella, Charlie said, voice rough. Bella stepped closer. Dad, she said quietly. Charlie's gaze flicked over her face like he was checking for injuries. You okay? He asked, tight. Bella nodded quickly. I'm fine, she said. Charlie exhaled hard, then looked at Edward. His jaw clenched. You, he said, voice flat. Edward's expression stayed controlled. Chief Swan, he said politely. Charlie's eyes narrowed. I told you, he said, tension rising. Bella stepped between them slightly. Dad, she said quickly, please. Charlie's gaze went back to her. His face softened for a second, then hardened again. Come inside, he said to Bella. Bella hesitated, then stepped into the house. Alice followed with a careful smile. Charlie's eyes flicked to her, confused. And who are you, Charlie asked. Alice smiled brightly, forcing a normal tone. Alice Cullen, she said happily. Bella's friend. Charlie's eyes narrowed slightly. Friend, he repeated, suspicious. Alice kept smiling. Yes, she said, too cheerful. Charlie's gaze shifted to me. And you? He asked. I smiled lightly. Kai, I said. Charlie's expression did not soften. Friend too? He asked, flat. Sort of, I replied calmly. Charlie looked annoyed, then looked back at Edward. I don't want you here, he said firmly. Edward's jaw tightened. I'm not here to fight, he said quietly. Bella asked me to drive her. Charlie's gaze snapped to Bella. Bella, he said, voice strained, what did I say? Bella's face tightened. Dad, she said quietly, I'm tired. I don't want to argue. Charlie's mouth tightened, then he exhaled hard and rubbed his forehead. Fine, he said, voice rough. Drive done. Now leave. Edward's posture stiffened. His eyes flicked to Bella, the need to stay obvious in every part of him. Bella's voice was quiet. Edward, she said, like she was trying to make it easier. It's okay. I'll call you. Edward's face tightened like the words hurt. Bella, he said softly. Charlie's eyes narrowed. No, he said firmly. You won't. Not right now. Bella's eyes flashed with irritation. Dad, she said, more forceful now. Charlie flinched slightly, then kept going because fear made him stubborn. I almost lost you, he said, voice rough. I'm not doing this. Bella's hands clenched. I'm not a kid, she said tightly. You're my kid, Charlie replied, voice strained. I stayed quiet, watching, keeping my posture easy. This was not my fight. This was a father and daughter doing what they always did when scared. Alice's smile had faded. She looked uncomfortable, eyes flicking between Bella and Charlie. Edward's jaw was clenched so hard it looked painful. Bella took a shaky breath, then forced her voice calmer. Dad, she said quietly, please just, let me rest. I'm home. I'm safe. Charlie's shoulders sagged slightly. He looked at her face, and his expression softened in a helpless way. Okay, he said quietly. Rest. He looked back at Edward, hard again. Go, he said. Edward held Bella's gaze for a long moment. I'll see you, he said quietly. Bella nodded once, eyes tight. Edward turned sharply and walked out. Alice followed, glancing back at Bella with a worried look. I paused at the doorway and looked at Bella. She stood still, arms tight at her sides. Her face looked controlled, but her eyes looked like she was holding back tears out of pure stubbornness. You'll be okay tonight, I said calmly. Bella nodded once. Yeah, she said quietly. Charlie's eyes narrowed at me. Who are you to tell her that? He asked, rough. I kept my tone polite and light. Someone who doesn't want her hurt, I said. Charlie stared at me, then looked away. Go, he said again, tired. I nodded and stepped out. Back in the car, Edward sat rigidly in the driver's seat. Alice sat in the back, hands clenched, looking annoyed at Charlie and worried about Bella at the same time. I sat beside her, calm. Edward didn't start the car immediately. His hands were tight on the wheel. Alice's voice was sharp. He's being ridiculous, she said, annoyed. Edward's voice was tight. He's human, he said quietly. Alice huffed. So is Bella, she replied. Edward didn't respond. I leaned back slightly. Charlie's scared, I said casually. He's going to act like a scared dad. Edward's jaw clenched. He's keeping me away, he said, voice low. I nodded. Yeah, I said. Alice looked at me. You're not bothered, she said, annoyed. I'm not the boyfriend, I replied cheerfully. Edward's eyes flicked to me, then away. We drove back to the Cullen house in tense silence. When we got inside, Esme looked up immediately. How did it go? She asked gently. Edward's voice was tight. He doesn't want me near her, he said. Esme's expression softened with sympathy. Edward, she said quietly. Edward turned away, jaw clenched. Jasper stepped forward, calm. He'll calm down, he said evenly. Edward's hands curled, then relaxed. He doesn't understand, he said, voice tight. Jasper's tone stayed controlled. No, he said. He doesn't. I watched Edward for a moment, then spoke lightly. Okay, I said. So we work with it. Edward's head turned slightly, eyes sharp. I smiled, still casual, but focused. You want Bella safe, I said. Charlie wants Bella safe. Those goals match. The difference is he thinks you're the danger. That's annoying, but it's workable. Edward's expression tightened, but he listened. Alice nodded quickly, impatient. So what? She asked. We make it easy for Charlie to believe Bella is safe, I said. We keep routines. We don't force confrontation. We don't show up at his house like a group. Edward's jaw tightened. I'm not staying away, he said. I nodded. You don't have to, I said calmly. But you do have to be smart. Edward's gaze sharpened. Jasper's eyes stayed on me. And how do you suggest? He asked evenly. I glanced at Alice and Jasper. I want to understand your tracking better, I said. I already asked. Now I want to see it in practice. Not on Bella. On something harmless. Alice's eyes brightened immediately. Like what? She asked. Like people at school, I said. A normal crowd. You track emotional shifts, I said to Jasper, and you, I said to Alice, watch for decision points. If we can catch small shifts early, we can catch big ones. Jasper nodded slightly. That's reasonable, he said. Alice smiled quickly. I can do that, she said. Edward's expression stayed tense. And Bella, he said quietly. We keep her calm tonight, Esme said gently. And we don't overwhelm Charlie. Edward's posture stayed rigid, but he didn't argue. He looked like he was holding himself together through effort. I kept my tone light again, trying to ease the room. Also, I said, you need sleep. Edward's eyes narrowed. I don't sleep, he said flatly. Then you need to sit down and stop pacing, I replied cheerfully. Emmett laughed from the doorway. He's got you there, he said. Edward glared at Emmett without any real heat. Alice moved closer to me, already energized by the idea of doing something practical. Tomorrow, she said quickly, we'll test it. Jasper nodded once. Tomorrow, he agreed. Edward's gaze flicked to the window, then back to the hallway as if he could hear Bella's heartbeat from miles away. I watched him, then softened my voice just a bit. We'll keep her alive, I said evenly. Edward's eyes flicked to me again. He didn't thank me. He didn't smile. But the tension in his shoulders eased by a small amount, like he allowed himself to believe it for half a second. Outside, the rain kept going. Inside, the house stayed warm, controlled, and tense in a quiet way, with plans being built out of small conversations and the kind of stubborn care that didn't need speeches to prove it. Chapter 5, Crowds, Signals and Quiet Pressure. The next morning started the way forks always started, with grey light and wet air and the kind of silence that made every small sound feel louder than it should. I woke up in the Cullen guest room and sat up slowly, stretching my shoulders once. The bed was too neat, the sheets too clean, like nobody was supposed to live messily in this house. Downstairs, I could hear movement, light footsteps, then a pause, then another set of footsteps that were heavier but still controlled. I got dressed and headed down. Esme was already in the kitchen, moving with quiet purpose. She looked up when I entered and smiled gently. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Morning," I replied happily. "It's still raining." Esme's smile grew a little. "It usually is." Alice popped into the doorway a second later, already dressed like she had planned it days ago. Her eyes were bright, but there was tension under it, like she was trying to keep herself busy on purpose. "You're up," she said quickly. "Yeah," I said. "I'm a morning person when people might die." Alice's expression tightened briefly, then smoothed. "Good," she said, voice brisk. "We're going to do what we talked about." Jasper appeared behind her, posture relaxed, eyes steady. "Carlisle wants it subtle," he said evenly. "I'm always subtle," I replied cheerfully. Alice gave me a look that said she did not believe that at all, then she grabbed my sleeve and tugged lightly. "Come on," she said. "We're leaving early." Esme's voice followed us, calm and gentle. "Be careful," she said. "We will," Jasper replied quietly. We stepped outside into the wet cold. The air smelled like damp pine and clean rain. Alice moved fast, then forced herself to slow down as we approached the cars, like she was reminding herself how humans looked when they walked. Jasper's car was already positioned for an easy exit. Alice slid into the passenger seat, and I took the back, settling in with an easy posture. As Jasper drove, Alice twisted in her seat to look at me. "So," she said quickly, "you really want us to test this at school?" "Yeah," I said. "Normal crowds. Normal noise. If there's a shift, we practice noticing it without making it obvious." Jasper's voice stayed even. "And your interest is still Victoria?" "Yeah," I said simply. Alice's jaw tightened. "I don't like that I can't see her clearly," she said, annoyed. "I get it," I replied lightly. "But you don't need a perfect picture. You need patterns." Jasper glanced at me in the rearview mirror, evaluating. "Patterns," he repeated. I nodded. "She'll watch," I said. "She won't rush into the Cullen house. She won't walk into the cafeteria like she's looking for a fight. She'll try to find Bella when she's isolated, or she'll try to pull one of you away." Alice's eyes narrowed. "You keep saying that," she said, suspicious. I smiled. "Because it's practical," I replied. Jasper's hands stayed steady on the wheel. "We've dealt with revenge before," he said quietly. Alice's eyes flicked to him with a quick, worried look. Jasper didn't react outwardly, but I could tell he was staying tightly controlled. We reached the school early, before most students had fully filled the lot. The grey sky made everything look flat and damp. The building looked exactly like it had yesterday, and I could already feel the normal energy of a school day starting. We parked, and Alice stepped out first, smoothing her jacket like she was preparing for a performance. Jasper stepped out next, calm and composed. I followed, hands in my pockets, and glanced around. Students arrived in small groups, laughing and talking. Doors opened and slammed. Tires hissed on wet pavement. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice low. "You two do your thing. I'll just watch and listen." Alice's eyes narrowed. "What's your thing?" she asked. "Standing around like I belong," I replied happily. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly. That's useful, he said, tone dry. We walked toward the building together. Alice kept her posture bright and normal. Jasper moved like someone who wanted to be invisible and couldn't quite manage it because he was too controlled. Inside, the hallway noise built fast. Lockers clanged. Shoes squeaked on the floor. The smell of wet jackets and cheap cafeteria food mixed in the air. Alice's gaze flicked around with quick precision. Jasper's eyes moved slower but sharper, scanning faces and posture shifts. I stayed loose, pretending I was just another student who had somehow always been here. Then I heard it. Bella's name. Not from one voice. From several, overlapping in that familiar, annoying high school way. Alice's head turned immediately. Jasper's posture tightened by a small amount. We moved toward the sound without rushing. Bella was at her locker, shoulders hunched slightly. Edward stood near her, too close to look casual, and too tense to pretend otherwise. Bella's face looked tired. Her eyes had shadows under them. She was forcing herself to stand straight. Jessica and Mike were there, along with Angela. Jessica's expression was a mix of excitement and fake concern. Mike looked angry and worried at the same time. Bella, Jessica was saying, voice high, you just disappeared. And then there was Phoenix. And then people are saying you got attacked. Bella's fingers clenched on her locker handle. It wasn't like that, she said quietly. Mike stepped closer, gaze fixed on Edward. This is because of him, he said, voice tight. Edward's face went cold. No, he said flatly. Bella flinched at the sharpness in Edward's tone. Angela touched Jessica's arm lightly. Jessica, she said softly, maybe we should stop. Jessica didn't stop. I'm just worried, she insisted, but her eyes were too bright. I stepped in beside Bella's locker with an easy smile, like I belonged in this group, and spoke lightly. Hey, I said. If you're worried, maybe don't corner her before first period. Jessica blinked at me. Who are you? She asked, immediate curiosity. Kai, I replied happily. Mike's eyes narrowed. Another one, he muttered. Bella glanced at me quickly, her expression a mix of relief and embarrassment. Edward's eyes flicked to me for half a second, sharp, then back to Mike. Jessica's gaze darted between me and Edward, like she was already building a story. Are you new? She asked. Kind of, I said. Mike scoffed. Of course, he said, and he looked back at Bella. Charlie's been worried sick, he said, voice softening when he addressed her. He was at the station last night. Bella's throat moved as she swallowed. I know, she said quietly. Edward's posture tightened. His gaze stayed on Bella's face, like he was tracking every shift in her breathing. Jasper and Alice reached us, both moving with practiced normalcy. Alice smiled brightly. Bella, she said happily, like this was a regular morning. I'm so glad you're here. Bella gave a small nod. Hi, Alice. Jessica's eyes widened like she was getting more material. Alice, she said. So you were with Bella too? Alice's smile stayed fixed. Yes, she said easily. We were helping. Mike's eyes narrowed again. Helping, he repeated, clearly not believing it. Jasper didn't speak. He just stood behind Alice, calm and watchful, his gaze on the humans' faces rather than their words. I kept my tone light. She's here now, I said. That's the important part. Jessica opened her mouth again. Angela cut in softly but firmly. Bella, she said, do you want to walk to class with me? Bella's eyes softened toward Angela. Yeah, she said quietly. Edward's expression tightened. He looked like he wanted to refuse, but Bella shifted her weight toward Angela, making it clear she needed a normal moment. Edward forced himself to nod once. "I'll be close," he said quietly. Bella's lips pressed together, annoyed but too tired to argue. Jessica huffed, clearly frustrated she wasn't getting more details. "Okay," she said, trying to sound casual. "Just text me later. I mean, if you want." Bella nodded faintly, not committing. Mike looked at Edward one more time, jaw clenched. "If she gets hurt again," he said, voice tight. Edward's eyes went flat. "She won't," he said. Mike flinched slightly at the cold certainty, then he backed off, following Jessica with a stiff posture. Angela gave Bella a small, reassuring smile and started walking toward class with her. Bella moved with her, shoulders slightly less tense. Edward followed at a careful distance, forcing himself not to hover too close. I walked on the other side, casual, like this was all normal. Alice fell in behind us, still smiling too brightly. Jasper stayed just behind Alice, eyes scanning the hallway. As we walked, Jasper's focus sharpened. I could feel the shift in him, subtle but real, like he was tuning into the crowd. He murmured quietly, mostly to Alice and me. "She's stressed," he said evenly. Alice nodded quickly. "I know," she whispered. I kept my voice low and light. "Yeah," I said. "She's doing the stubborn thing where she pretends she's fine." Bella glanced back at me, heard just enough, and shot me a look that was tired and mildly offended. I smiled back at her, friendly. In the classroom, Bella sat down and tried to focus. Edward positioned himself nearby, posture controlled but tense. Angela sat with Bella, calm and steady. I took a seat a row back again. Alice and Jasper settled into positions that looked normal for them, but I could tell they were working. Alice's gaze kept flicking to faces and posture changes, like she was mapping decisions. Jasper's attention stayed broader, sensing the emotional temperature of the room. The lesson started. Mr. Banner's voice was dull. Bella wrote notes like she was trying to anchor herself to routine. Nothing happened for the first half of class. No sudden fear spike. No strange scent. No visible threat. Then Jasper's posture changed slightly. His eyes narrowed, and his attention drifted toward the windows, then toward the hallway door. Alice's head tilted in the same direction. I noticed too, not through scent or supernatural senses from this world, but through the way the room's mood shifted. A small spike of nervousness, like someone had walked past the door too quickly, like something had triggered a vague instinct in the human students. Jasper leaned a fraction toward Alice. "Did you see anything?" he murmured. Alice's voice was quick and quiet. "No," she whispered, frustrated. "It's just noise." Jasper's jaw tightened slightly. "Crowd reaction," he said. I stayed seated, relaxed, but my attention sharpened. I didn't move dramatically. I didn't look like I was ready to fight. I just watched. A student passed the door. Another. The hallway was active. Nothing obvious. Bella's pen paused for half a second. Her breathing shifted. Edward noticed immediately and leaned closer, his voice low. "Bella," he whispered. Bella shook her head slightly, not looking at him. "I'm fine," she whispered back. Edward's jaw clenched, then he forced himself to settle. Jasper's eyes stayed on the door. Alice's fingers tapped lightly on her notebook, restless. When the bell rang, the room erupted into movement. Students shoved chairs back and grabbed bags. Bella stood slowly, like her body was heavier than usual. Angela touched Bella's arm lightly. "You okay?" she asked softly. Bella nodded quickly. "Yeah," she said. Edward stepped closer. "Let's go," he said quietly. Bella looked like she wanted to argue, then didn't. She just walked. In the hallway, the noise and movement made it harder to track anything, but Jasper stayed tuned. Alice kept scanning. I moved beside Jasper for a second, voice low. "That shift earlier," I said quietly. "That's what you mean?" Jasper nodded once. "Yes," he said evenly. "It wasn't strong. But it was real." Alice's expression was tight. "I hate not knowing," she said quietly. "You can still use it," I replied calmly. "You don't have to like it." Alice shot me a look, then sighed. "Fine," she said, annoyed. We walked toward lunch. Bella moved slowly, keeping her head down. Edward stayed near her without touching. Angela stuck close, clearly trying to help without making Bella feel like she was being handled. At the cafeteria, Jessica tried again. She approached fast, her eyes wide. "Bella," she said, voice urgent. "I talked to Lauren and she said." Bella's face tightened. "Jessica," she said quietly, warning. Jessica ignored the warning. "She said the police were at your house," she continued. "And that Charlie looked like he hadn't slept." "What happened?" Bella's shoulders rose, tense. "Nothing," she said, but it sounded strained. Mike appeared behind Jessica, eyes fixed on Edward again. "You're not good for her," he said, voice tight. Bella's eyes flashed with irritation. "Mike," she said sharply, louder than she meant to. The cafeteria noise seemed to dip around them for a moment, as nearby students pretended not to listen while absolutely listening. Edward's face went cold again. His voice stayed quiet. "Leave," he said flatly. Mike stiffened. "No," he said, voice rising slightly. "Someone needs to." I stepped forward with an easy smile and cut in, cheerful. "Okay," I said. "Lunchtime. Everyone breathe." Jessica blinked at me. "Why are you always here?" she asked, suspicious. "Because I like cafeteria food," I replied happily. Alice made a small sound that might have been a laugh if she wasn't tense. Jasper's eyes stayed on Mike, calm but warning. Angela moved closer to Bella, speaking softly. "Come sit with us," she said gently. Bella swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yeah," she said quietly. Edward hesitated. Bella glanced at him, her expression tired and pleading. Edward's face tightened, then he nodded once. We moved toward the Cullen table, which immediately made Jessica's eyes widen like she'd just won a prize. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered, loud enough to be heard. "She's sitting with them again." Mike looked frustrated and helpless. He didn't follow, but his gaze stayed fixed on Bella like he couldn't let it go. Bella sat down carefully, shoulders tense. Edward sat near her, posture rigid. Alice slid into her usual spot, bright smile reappearing like she could force normal into existence. Jasper took his place behind Alice, calm as always. Emmett and Rosalie weren't at the table yet, but I could see them across the room, moving in their controlled way. I sat at the edge of the table, posture relaxed, and looked at Bella. "You're doing great," I said lightly. Bella shot me a tired look. "I'm not," she said quietly. "You are," I replied cheerfully. "You didn't throw a tray at anyone." Bella's lips twitched, almost a smile, then she looked away quickly like she didn't want Edward to see her reacting to anything that wasn't him. Edward noticed anyway. His eyes softened a fraction, then tightened again with guilt. Alice leaned forward, trying to pull Bella into something normal. "I can bring you something later," she said brightly. "For your room. Something comfortable." Bella blinked. "You already did," she said quietly. Alice smiled wider. I can bring more, she said happily. Bella looked overwhelmed. Okay, she said softly, just to end it. Jasper's gaze stayed broad, scanning the cafeteria. I watched him work. He wasn't looking for one person. He was listening to the emotional pattern of the whole room. I leaned slightly toward him, keeping it subtle. Any spikes? I murmured. Jasper's voice was low. Mostly curiosity, he said evenly. Some jealousy. Mild anger from that one. His eyes flicked briefly toward Mike. Alice muttered, annoyed, he's always like that. Edward's jaw tightened. He didn't speak, but his expression made it clear he wanted Mike to stop existing in Bella's life. Bella poked at her food, barely eating. Edward watched her like he was trying to force her to eat through sheer focus. I kept my tone light. Bella, I said, if you don't eat, Charlie's going to think the Cullens are starving you. Bella blinked, then sighed softly. He already thinks you're all weird, she said quietly. Alice smiled brightly. We are, she said happily. Bella gave a tiny, reluctant smile. It faded quickly, replaced by tension. Jasper's posture shifted again, subtle. His gaze moved toward the cafeteria entrance, then to a group of students near the doors. Nothing obvious, but his attention sharpened. Alice's head tilted too. What? She asked quietly. Jasper didn't answer immediately. He watched for a second, then spoke low. There's a ripple, he said evenly. My cheerful expression didn't change, but my focus snapped tighter. Where? I asked quietly. Jasper's eyes flicked toward the entrance again. Near the doors, he said. Alice's fingers tightened around her fork. I don't see anything, she whispered, irritated. Edward's gaze flicked toward Jasper instantly, alert. Bella noticed the shift and stiffened. What? She asked quietly, tension rising. I kept my voice calm and light. Nothing, I said quickly. Just Jasper being Jasper. Bella didn't look convinced, but she forced herself to look down again, breathing shallow. Jasper's attention stayed on the doors. The ripple wasn't panic. It was a mild, uncertain discomfort, like someone had passed by and made people uneasy without them knowing why. A teacher entered. A student laughed too loudly. Someone dropped a tray. The noise covered it. Then the ripple faded. Jasper's shoulders loosened slightly. Gone, he murmured. Alice's expression stayed tight, annoyed at the lack of clarity. I hate this, she whispered. I nodded once. Yeah, I said softly. But you caught it. That matters. Alice looked at me sharply, then her expression softened a fraction. Fine, she said, still irritated, but less tense. Edward's posture didn't relax. He kept watching the room, then Bella, then the room again. Bella finally set her fork down and pressed her fingers against her temple briefly. I'm tired, she said quietly. Edward's voice was immediate. We'll leave, he said. Bella's eyes widened. No, she said quickly. Charlie will. Edward's jaw clenched. I don't care what he thinks, he said quietly, then caught himself and softened. I care what you need. Bella swallowed hard. I need to not make things worse, she said, voice tight. I leaned back slightly and kept my tone practical. Okay, I said. Then we do it normal. Finish the day. No scenes. Then we take you home the way Charlie expects. Bella's eyes flicked to me, tired. You sound like you've done this before, she said quietly. I smiled lightly. I've seen stressed people, I replied. Edward's gaze snapped to me briefly, sharp, then back to Bella. The afternoon dragged. Bella moved through classes like she was walking through water. Not dramatic, just slow, drained. Every time someone asked her a question, she stiffened. Every time Edward spoke too quickly, she got annoyed. Every time she looked like she might crack, she forced herself to tighten up again. I stayed near, casual and steady. Alice and Jasper kept tracking, not obsessively, but consistently. Jasper paid attention to the crowd's emotional patterns. Alice watched decision points, which students turned to stare, who chose to follow Bella into a hallway, who chose to linger near Edward's car. At the end of the day, the parking lot was loud and wet. Jessica approached again, but Angela cut her off with a calm look and guided Bella away without being rude. Mike hovered, then backed off when Jasper's calm stare landed on him for too long. Bella climbed into the car with a tired exhale. Edward slid into the driver's seat, posture tense. Alice and I got into the back, with Jasper following in a second car behind us, keeping distance like a normal family would. As Edward drove toward Charlie's house, Bella stared out the window, face tight. "He's going to ask about school," she said quietly. Edward's voice was soft but strained. "Tell him it was normal," he said. Bella let out a short breath. "It wasn't," she replied quietly. I kept my tone light. "Tell him it was mostly normal," I said. "That's close enough." Bella glanced at me, tired irritation showing. "You make everything sound easy," she said. I smiled. "Most things are," I said. "This isn't one of them, but we can still do it." Bella looked away again. Alice leaned forward slightly, voice quick but careful. "Charlie's going to calm down eventually," she said, forcing brightness. Bella didn't respond. When we pulled into the driveway, Charlie opened the door almost immediately. His face was tense. His eyes went straight to Edward, then to Alice, then to me. Bella stepped out slowly. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. Charlie's expression softened for a second when he looked at her, then tightened again. "Inside," he said firmly. Bella nodded and walked in. Edward hesitated on the porch. His posture was rigid. Charlie's gaze hardened. "Go," Charlie said flatly. Edward's jaw clenched, but he nodded once, stiff. "Good night," he said quietly to Bella. Bella turned slightly, her expression tight. "Good night," she said, voice small. Alice gave a bright smile that didn't match the tension. "Bye, Bella," she said happily. Bella nodded faintly. I gave Bella a small nod too. "See you," I said calmly. Bella's eyes flicked to mine. She looked tired and stressed, but there was relief there too, small and real. "Yeah," she whispered. Charlie's gaze snapped to me again. "You," he said, rough. "You friends with her now too?" I smiled politely. "I'm around," I said. Charlie's expression didn't soften. "Less around," he muttered, mostly to himself, then he looked back at Edward. "Leave." Edward turned and walked away, posture controlled like he was holding himself together by force. We got back into the car. Edward's hands tightened around the wheel. Alice's expression was frustrated. I stayed relaxed, but my attention stayed sharp. As we drove back toward the Cullen house, Jasper's car followed at a steady distance. Alice finally spoke, annoyed. "I didn't see anything," she said. "Nothing clear." Jasper's voice came through on the phone speaker Edward had connected, calm and low. "I felt 2 mild shifts today," he said evenly. "Neither became anything." Edward's voice was tight. "Victoria," he said quietly. Jasper paused. "Possibly," he said. Alice huffed. "I hate possibly," she said. I leaned back and kept my voice light. Possibly is still useful, I said. We're not blind. Edward didn't respond. His jaw was clenched hard. His eyes stayed on the road, but I could tell his mind was stuck on Bella behind that door, with Charlie between them. The Cullen house came into view again through the rain. Warm lights glowed behind the windows. We parked. Edward didn't move right away. I kept my voice gentle but steady. You did good today, I said quietly. Edward's head turned slightly, eyes sharp. No, he said flatly. I didn't. You didn't start a fight with Mike, I said lightly. That counts. Alice let out a short laugh, then sighed. Jasper's voice stayed calm through the speaker. It does count, he said evenly. Edward's posture loosened by a tiny amount, like the words forced him to accept something small. We stepped out into the wet cold and headed inside. Chapter 6, Scent, Rain, and a Moving Target. Edward didn't speak much after we got back to the Cullen house. He moved through the front door like he was carrying a weight in his chest that wouldn't shift, no matter how careful he stood. Alice went straight to the living room, fast steps, then slowed on purpose once she got there. Jasper followed at a normal pace, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the room like it might change under his feet. Esme looked up from where she had been sitting, her posture gentle and ready. How is she? She asked quietly. Edward's jaw tightened. Tired, he said in a flat tone. Carlyle stepped out from his office space, calm as always. He looked at Edward's face first, then at Alice and Jasper. Charlie was firm, he asked evenly. Edward's mouth tightened. Yes, he said. Carlyle nodded once, accepting it without argument. That is expected, he said. I kicked my shoes off at the entryway and walked into the living room, hands loose, expression friendly. Well, I said happily, I would rate that visit a solid 4 out of 10. Alice shot me a look that was half annoyed and half relieved I was talking normally. It was awful, she said quickly. It was predictable, I replied. Edward finally looked at me fully, his eyes sharp. Stop, he said quietly. I blinked at him, still calm. Stop what? Stop acting like this is nothing, he said, voice tight. I kept my voice light, but I let it settle into something steadier. I'm not acting like it's nothing, I said. I'm acting like it's manageable. Edward's gaze stayed hard. Jasper's posture tightened slightly, like he was ready to cut in if Edward escalated. Carlyle spoke gently. Edward, he said. Edward exhaled through his nose, then turned away slightly, controlling himself. He didn't apologize. He wasn't in a place to. Esme moved closer, her voice soft. You should all sit, she said. We can talk. Emmett wandered in from the kitchen with a loud, casual step that did not match the tension. Talking, he said, amused. My favorite. Rosalie appeared behind him, expression cold. Her gaze flicked to me for half a second, then away. She looked like she had decided I wasn't worth the energy, which was better than her deciding I was. We ended up in the living room, the same positions as always. Carlyle sat with his hands folded, calm and attentive. Esme sat near him. Alice perched on the couch, restless. Jasper stayed near her, controlled. Emmett leaned back, acting relaxed. Rosalie stood rather than sit. Edward stayed close to the window, staring out into the rain. I took the chair across from Carlyle. So, I said, cheerful but focused, we're adjusting around Charlie. That's fine. But the bigger problem is still outside. Alice's eyes flicked to me quickly. I don't see anything clear, she said, frustrated. Jasper's voice was low. I felt 2 small shifts today, he said evenly. Nothing that became a threat. Edward's shoulders tightened. It's not enough, he said quietly, staring at the glass. Carlyle's tone stayed calm. We do what we can with what we have, he said. I nodded. And we don't wait for her to get lucky, I said. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. Her, she said flatly. Edward's jaw clenched. Alice's fingers tightened slightly on her knee. Carlyle didn't pretend not to understand. Victoria, he said evenly. Esme's expression softened with concern. Emmett's casual smile faded a little. Edward finally turned away from the window, his expression tight. She won't come here, he said, voice controlled. Not to this house. No, I said simply. She'll go where Bella is. The room went still. Alice's eyes widened a fraction. Jasper's gaze sharpened. Carlyle's expression stayed composed, but his attention intensified. Edward's voice went low. Charlie's house, he said. I nodded once. Yes, I replied. Edward moved like he was about to leave immediately. Carlyle lifted a hand. Edward, he said calmly. Edward froze, muscles tight. Carlyle's voice stayed even. We plan before we move, he said. Edward's eyes flashed. Planning doesn't stop her, he said tightly. It does if we do it properly, Carlyle replied, still gentle. I stood slowly, keeping my tone light so the room didn't break into a fight. Okay, I said. Here's the plan. We cover Bella without breaking Charlie's rules in a way that makes him dig in harder. Rosalie made a quiet sound of annoyance. You're making plans now, she said. I glanced at her with a friendly expression. Yeah, I said. It's a hobby. Edward didn't look amused. Jasper's gaze stayed steady. Carlyle nodded once. Continue, he said. We don't put a group at Charlie's house, I said. Humans notice. Charlie notices. Bella notices. Alice leaned forward. So what? She asked quickly. So one person, I said. Far enough away that Charlie doesn't see. Close enough to move if needed. Edward's jaw tightened. I'll go, he said immediately. No, Carlyle said gently, firm. Edward's eyes snapped to Carlyle. Why? He demanded, tight. Because if Charlie sees you, Carlyle said evenly, he will escalate. Bella will be trapped inside that house by fear and anger. That helps Victoria. Edward's hands clenched into fists. He looked like he wanted to argue until his throat bled, then he forced himself still. Alice spoke quickly. I can go, she said. Carlyle looked at Alice with a careful expression. Alice, he said. Alice's eyes narrowed, impatient. I can do it, she insisted. Jasper's voice was low. If you go alone and something happens, he said, controlled, you'll move too fast for humans to miss it. Alice huffed. So I walk slowly, she said. Jasper gave her a look that said she was not capable of walking slowly when it mattered. Emmett raised a hand lazily. I can do it, he said, grinning. I can stand in the woods and look mysterious. Rosalie shot him a look full of irritation. You can't look mysterious, she said flatly. You look like you want to wrestle a tree. Emmett's grin widened. That's not wrong. Carlyle's gaze shifted to me. Kai, he said, calm. Would you be willing? I smiled. Yeah, I said easily. That's what I'm here for. Edward's head turned sharply. No, he said, voice tight. I looked at him. Why? I asked, still calm. Because I don't know what you'll do, he said flatly. I smiled faintly. I'll stop her, I replied. That's not an answer, he said, tight. It is, I said, cheerful. It's just not detailed enough for you. Carlyle's voice stayed even. Kai has been careful, he said. He has helped without drawing human attention. That matters. Edward's gaze stayed hard. He looked like he wanted control more than anything. Jasper spoke quietly. If you go, he said to me, keep distance from the house. If Victoria is there, she'll be on the edge. She won't walk under a porch light. I nodded. Got it, I said. Alice's eyes tightened. I want to come, she said quickly. No, I said happily. Alice blinked. Excuse me. I said no, I repeated, still friendly. You're useful when you're not forced into reacting. If you go, you'll get pulled into the moment. I don't want that. Alice stared at me like she wanted to argue. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly, and I could tell he agreed. Carlyle nodded once. Alice, stay here, he said gently. Watch what you can. If something becomes clear, you tell us. Alice crossed her arms and pouted. Fine, she said, not fine at all. Edward's posture stayed rigid. If she's there, he said quietly, don't let her leave. I glanced at him. I'm not promising that, I said calmly. Edward's eyes sharpened. Why? He asked tightly. Because if I chase her too far, I said, I might draw attention. I might create a bigger problem than the one we're solving. Edward's jaw clenched. He looked like he hated the word bigger almost as much as he hated the word wait. Carlyle's tone stayed calm. Stop her from reaching Bella, he said. That is the priority. I nodded. Yeah, I said. That's the job. Esme's voice was gentle. Please be careful, she said softly. I smiled at her. Always, I replied. I didn't grab a coat. I didn't need one. I stepped out into the wet night like it was a normal walk. The rain hit my hair and soaked into my shirt almost immediately. The cold didn't bother me much. I moved down the driveway and into the tree line, away from the house. The forest swallowed sound quickly. The road noise faded. Forks got quiet fast at night, the kind of quiet that made you hear your own steps. I stopped and focused inward. My grimoires were there, stacked inside me like a whole set of tools waiting in order. I didn't bring one out physically like in Black Clover. I didn't need to. I could call the function directly. That difference mattered here. I wasn't going to hover a book in the air in a world where that would create panic. I chose shadow first. Shadow magic slid through my limbs like a controlled shift. Not dramatic. Not flashy. It simply changed how I moved through space. I stepped forward and my body blurred into the darker spaces between trees, my shape harder to pick out even if someone looked directly at me. Then I moved. I traveled through the forest fast, but not at vampire speed. Not yet. I kept it controlled, using reinforcement magic through my muscles and joints to remove strain, letting my body move efficiently and silently. The rain covered whatever faint sound I made. Charlie's house came into view through the trees. A small box of light in a wet world. I stayed on the edge of the woods, far enough back that any human looking out the window would see nothing but rain and dark. I watched the house, the yard, the road. I listened. I didn't have vampire senses. I didn't need them. I had magic that could read movement, pressure changes, and presence in a way that didn't rely on scent. At first, there was nothing. The house sat quiet. The television flickered behind curtains. A car passed on the road and kept going. Then something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was a change in the pattern of the forest, like something that didn't belong had entered the edge of the area and the normal animals had gone still. My attention snapped sharper. I felt it again, closer now. A presence moving with purpose, careful but not hesitant. Victoria. I didn't see her immediately. She was good at using cover, and she wasn't moving like James. James had enjoyed being seen. Victoria didn't. She moved like she wanted one clean moment, one gap, one mistake. She stayed downwind of the house, far enough out that her scent would still catch Bella's trail without putting her under a porch light. Smart? I let out a quiet breath and smiled once, not because it was funny, but because it was simple now. She was here. I didn't have to guess. I stepped deeper into the woods, drawing her attention away from the house without making noise that would alert Charlie. I let my presence show just enough, like a small disturbance in the trees. Victoria paused. I finally saw her between two trunks, her pale face turned slightly, eyes bright in the dark. She stared toward Charlie's house first, then toward me. Her expression tightened when she realized someone was here. She didn't rush. She watched. I raised a hand slightly and gave a small wave, cheerful. "Hey," I said quietly. Her lips pulled back from her teeth in a controlled, angry expression. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. She moved. The speed was immediate and violent, the kind of speed that would tear a human apart before the human's brain could process motion. I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I reinforced my body fully and stepped into her line, turning at the last moment. Her hand swept toward my throat. I used shadow magic to slip sideways, letting her fingers cut through empty air. She adjusted instantly, spinning, trying to catch me with the backhand. I raised my arm and took it on the forearm, braced. The impact was heavy, like getting hit by a car that had decided to be quiet. My feet slid slightly on wet earth. I smiled, still calm. "Okay," I said softly. "So you're fast." Victoria snarled, low and sharp, and attacked again. I chose a different tool. Dark magic. A black line formed along my hand like a controlled edge, not glowing, not flashy, just present. It was dense and heavy in a way that didn't belong in this world. Victoria's eyes flicked to it, and for the first time her expression changed into caution. She tried to pull back. I stepped forward and swung. The dark blade didn't cut like steel. It cut like force. It struck her shoulder and she jerked away, the impact tearing through muscle and sending her back. She landed in a crouch, one hand pressed to her shoulder. Her face tightened, teeth bared. She healed fast, but not instantly. That mattered. I kept my voice light. "You should go," I said pleasantly. Her eyes locked on me with hatred so direct it felt physical. She lunged again. This time I used binding. Chain magic. Thin, dark chain snapped from the air around her ankles and wrists, not wrapping like a slow trap, but locking the moment her limbs extended. She slammed forward anyway, dragging the chains with brute strength, snapping one of them with a sharp crack. Her strength was real. Her anger made it stronger. I didn't waste time. I layered anti-magic into the chains. That was the first time the night truly changed. The chains didn't glow. They didn't sparkle. They simply became wrong for her body. Her movement stuttered. Her healing slowed. Her strength met resistance that wasn't physical. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Not fear. Surprise. I stepped in close and struck her across the face with the flat of the dark blade. The hit knocked her sideways, sending her sliding across wet ground. She rolled and sprang up, faster than human eyes, but her movement had a slight drag now. The anti-magic effect wasn't perfect in this world, but it was enough to disrupt her. She hissed, low and furious. I kept my stance relaxed, cheerful tone still there even as my focus stayed hard. "You're not getting to her," I said evenly. Victoria didn't respond with words. She didn't need to. She changed tactics. She stopped coming at me directly and instead shot past, aiming for the house again, trying to use speed and distance to break line of sight. I moved faster. I reinforced my legs, used shadow to cut distance, and appeared in her path without making a sound that would reach the house. She slammed into me like a collision. We hit the ground hard. Mud splashed. Rain soaked us both. Her hands tried to find my throat again. I grabbed her wrists and held. For a second, we stayed locked, her face inches from mine, her eyes bright and furious. She smelled like cold stone and something sharp. Her body was tense like a coiled spring. She tried to tear free. I didn't let her. I shifted to a spell that would end it quickly without forcing me to rip her apart in a way that would be loud. Sealing magic. A tight pattern pressed down around her like invisible weight. Her limbs pinned. Her shoulders pressed into the ground. The earth under her cracked slightly. Her eyes widened again, and this time there was a flash of something that looked like real concern. I leaned closer, voice quiet, still controlled. "If you keep coming," I said, "I will keep stopping you." Victoria bared her teeth. Then she did what I expected her to do. She didn't stay. She forced a burst of strength through the seal, snapping it enough to twist free, ripping her own skin to get out of the pressure. She launched backward into the trees, moving fast, using cover. I stood and watched the direction she fled. I didn't chase her far. I could have. I had tools that would let me trap her completely. But I wasn't here to start a war in the forest that would end with a human calling the police because they heard trees breaking. I wiped rain off my face and exhaled. Behind me, Charlie's house stayed quiet. No lights turned on. No door opened. Good. I moved back through the trees and returned toward the road, careful to keep my speed controlled until I was deeper in the forest again. When I reached the Cullen house, the front door opened before I could touch it. Edward stood there, posture rigid, eyes sharp and restless. Jasper was behind him, calm but tense. Carlyle was just inside the doorway, composed. Alice was near the stairs, eyes wide and frustrated. Edward's gaze locked on me. "Where is she?" he demanded tightly. "Gone," I said. Edward's jaw clenched. "You let her leave," he said, voice tight. I stepped inside, dripping rain onto the polished floor, then paused and looked at him calmly. "I stopped her from reaching Bella," I said evenly. Edward's eyes flashed. "That's not enough." Carlyle's voice was firm but gentle. "Edward," he said. Edward's chest rose and fell in a controlled breath. He didn't back down, but he stopped pushing forward. Alice moved closer, eyes narrowed. "I didn't see it," she said quickly. "I didn't see her show up at Charlie's. I didn't see the fight. I didn't see anything." I glanced at her. "Yeah," I said simply. "I know." Alice's face tightened. "Stop saying that," she snapped, irritated. I smiled faintly. "No," I replied happily. Jasper studied me, his gaze sharp. "You used something," he said quietly. I nodded once. "Yeah," I said. Edward's eyes narrowed. "What?" he asked, flat and demanding. I didn't play around. Not now. The tension in the room wasn't casual. It was protective. It was serious. "I used my grimoire abilities," I said plainly. The room went still. Emmett appeared in the hallway, suddenly alert. Rosalie's eyes narrowed from the stairs. Esme stepped closer, her expression concerned. Carlyle's voice stayed calm. "Explain what that means in practical terms," he said gently. "I can cast," I said. "I can bind. I can cut. I can disrupt." Edward's gaze stayed hard. "And you didn't tell us," he said. "I didn't need to," I replied calmly. "You needed Bella safe." Edward's hands clenched. "You are not part of this family," he said tightly. I nodded. "True," I said. "But I'm part of the situation." Jasper's voice stayed low. "Was she injured?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "Not permanently. Enough to make her cautious." Edward's eyes sharpened. "How?" he demanded. I lifted my hand slightly. Dark magic formed along my fingers again, a controlled edge that didn't glow, just existed. The air near it felt heavier. The room's mood tightened immediately. Alice's eyes widened. Emmett stared openly, impressed. Jasper's posture stiffened. Carlyle remained calm, but his attention sharpened. Edward went still, staring at my hand. "That," he said quietly. "Dark magic," I said. Then I let it fade. I raised my other hand and formed a thin chain in the air for a half second, then let it vanish. "Binding," I added. Carlyle's voice stayed careful. "And this works on vampires," he said. "Enough," I replied. Edward's jaw clenched. "Why didn't you finish her?" he asked, tight. I shrugged slightly. "Because finishing her means noise," I said. "Noise means humans. Humans mean Bella's life gets smaller." Edward looked like he hated that answer, but he didn't dismiss it. Alice's voice was quick and tense. "So she was at Charlie's," she said. "Yes," I replied. Esme's hand lifted toward her mouth briefly, then lowered. "Bella," she whispered, worried. "She didn't get close," I said evenly. Carlyle nodded once. "Good," he said. Edward stared at the floor for a second, then back at me. "She'll come again," he said, voice tight. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. Jasper's gaze stayed on me. "If you can disrupt her healing," he said quietly, "that changes how we handle her." I nodded. "It does," I said. Carlyle looked at Edward. "We will adjust the plan," he said calmly. "And we will do it in a way that keeps Charlie from locking Bella away completely." Edward's expression tightened, then he forced himself to nod once, stiff. Emmett stepped closer, grinning in a way that was half excitement and half relief. "So you've got, like, magic books," he said. I smiled. "Yeah," I replied cheerfully. "A lot of them." Rosalie's expression stayed cold. "Convenient," she said flatly. I glanced at her and shrugged. "It is," I said. Alice's eyes stayed on me, frustrated. "If you can do that," she said quickly, "then why didn't you show us sooner?" "Because you would have reacted," I said simply. "You'd have changed your behavior. Bella would have noticed. Charlie would have noticed. People talk." Alice frowned, but she didn't argue, because she knew it was true. Edward's voice was low. "Next time," he said tightly, "I want to be there." I looked at him calmly. "Next time," I replied, "we'll do what keeps Bella alive." Edward's eyes flashed, then he forced himself still again. Carlyle's gaze held mine. "Thank you," he said quietly. I nodded. "No problem," I said, tone lighter again. It was a wet walk, but otherwise fine. Esme's shoulders loosened slightly, relief showing in her face. Alice still looked irritated, but her breathing was calmer. Jasper stayed controlled, but his posture had eased. Edward didn't relax. He couldn't. Not yet. He turned toward the window again, staring into the rain like he could see Charlie's house through miles of trees. His hands were clenched so tight the tendons stood out. I watched him for a second, then spoke lightly, not pushing too hard. "You should tell Bella tomorrow," I said. "Not the details. Just that you're handling it." Edward's voice was tight. "Charlie won't let me," he said. Carlisle's tone stayed calm. "We will find a way that doesn't force Charlie into a corner," he said. Edward didn't answer. He just stared outside, tense and silent. I leaned back against the wall, rain still dripping off my hair, and let my grimoires settle again inside me, quiet and ready. Chapter 7, Second Pass at Night. Nobody slept. Not because anyone said it out loud, but because the house felt like it was holding its breath. The rain didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It just kept falling in a steady, dull way that made the world outside sound far away. I stood in the living room with my damp hair drying on its own. Alice was on the couch, legs tucked under her, arms folded tight. Jasper stood behind her, posture calm but locked in. Edward was near the window again, still, staring out into the dark like he could force distance to collapse if he focused hard enough. Carlisle spoke quietly with Esme near the kitchen, voices low and controlled. Emmett had stopped joking. He leaned against the doorway with his arms crossed, eyes sharp. Rosalie watched from the stairs, expression cold, gaze flicking between Edward and me like she was measuring how much damage we could bring into their lives. I kept my posture loose, expression friendly, because that was how I was by default. I didn't treat every tense moment like it needed a speech. Alice's eyes snapped to me again. "So she just left," she said quickly, still annoyed. "Yes," I replied calmly. Edward's voice cut in, tight. "You let her leave?" I glanced at him. "I stopped her from getting to Bella," I said evenly. Edward's jaw clenched. His hands curled slightly at his sides. He didn't move, but his whole body looked like it wanted to. Carlisle stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. "Edward," he said. Edward's eyes flicked to Carlisle, then away. Jasper's gaze stayed on me. "You said she was cautious now," he said evenly. "Yeah," I said. Alice leaned forward, eyes bright with frustration. "Then why does it feel worse?" she demanded quickly. "If she got hurt, why would she come back?" "Because she's angry," I said. "And because she's not thinking about winning in one clean move anymore. She's thinking about wearing you down." Alice's expression tightened. Jasper's eyes narrowed slightly, like he agreed. Edward's voice was low. "She won't get the chance," he said, tight. I smiled faintly. "Good," I replied. The room settled into silence again. Rain tapped the windows. The lights stayed warm and steady. Then Alice froze. It was sudden. Her head tilted slightly, eyes unfocusing for half a second. Her fingers, which had been gripping her own sleeve, loosened, then tightened hard. Jasper's posture changed immediately. His eyes flicked to her face. "Alice," he said quietly. Alice inhaled sharply. "She decided," she said fast. Edward turned away from the window so quickly it looked like a snap. "What?" he demanded. Alice's eyes refocused, wide and tense. "Victoria," she said quickly. "She's moving. Now. She's not hesitating." Edward's face went hard. "Where?" he asked, voice tight. Alice swallowed once. "Near Charlie's," she said. "Not at the house yet. She's cutting around. She's trying to approach from the trees. Esme's hand went to her mouth briefly. Carlyle moved instantly into action, calm but fast. Edward, Jasper, Emmett, he said evenly. Go. Alice, stay with me and keep tracking. Rosalie. Rosalie's expression sharpened. No, she said flatly, stepping down a stair. I'm going. Carlyle looked at her for a long beat. Rosalie, he said, careful. Rosalie's eyes flashed with irritation. If Bella dies, Edward will fall apart, she said coldly. And then we all deal with it. I'm going. Edward didn't even look at Rosalie. He was already moving. I stepped forward, cheerful tone gone lighter but still steady. I'm going too, I said. Edward's eyes snapped to me. You're not leaving my sight, he said, voice tight. I nodded. That's fine, I replied. Jasper's voice was low. Keep it quiet, he said, already moving toward the door. Emmett moved too, faster than he looked like he should. Finally, he muttered, not joking, just keyed up. Alice grabbed Carlyle's sleeve for a second. She's close, she said quickly. She's angry. She's focused. She's not alone in her head, but she is alone physically. Carlyle nodded once. Good, he said. That helps. We were out the door in a blur of controlled motion. The cars were faster than they had any right to be. I rode with Edward, because of course I did. Edward drove like the road was an inconvenience. His hands were steady, but his jaw was clenched so hard the muscles jumped. His eyes flicked to the trees and back to the road. You're hearing her, I said calmly. Yes, he said tightly. Not yet. But soon. I leaned back in the seat, posture loose, and opened my awareness inward without making it obvious. I chose a set of grimoires that would work together without turning this into a light show. Shadow for movement. Chain for restraint. Ceiling for stopping a burst. One more option, in case she tried to slip past, spatial control, but used gently, like shifting a step rather than ripping space open. Edward's voice was sharp. No mistakes, he said, like he was talking to me and himself at the same time. I smiled faintly. I'm not the one who gets emotional, I replied. His eyes flicked to me, cold. I'm not emotional, he said flatly. I looked out the windshield, still calm. Sure, I said. He didn't answer. We reached Charlie's neighborhood and cut the headlights early. Edward parked a few houses down, out of direct view. The rain covered sound. The night covered movement. Jasper and Emmett arrived in the other car, with Rosalie. Jasper's eyes were already scanning. Emmett looked keyed up, grin gone, face focused. Rosalie's expression stayed hard. Alice's voice came through Edward's phone speaker, fast and tight. She's on the tree line behind the house, she said. She's not at the porch. She's circling. She's trying to catch Bella's scent without getting seen. Edward's shoulders tightened. Bella's inside, he said, voice low. I know, Alice replied quickly. Victoria is trying to stay far enough back that Charlie won't notice anything, but close enough to confirm she can reach her. Jasper's voice was low. We cut her off from the back, he said. Emmett nodded. I'll flank, he said. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. Don't make it obvious, she said sharply. Emmett shot her a look. I know, he said, annoyed. Edward looked at me. You take point, he said, voice tight, like it hurt him to say it. I smiled, still calm. Good choice, I replied. Edward's eyes flashed, then he looked away. We moved into the trees behind Charlie's house. The forest swallowed us fast. Rain hit leaves and bark, making everything slick. The house lights glowed faintly through branches. The smell of humans was there, and Bella's scent trail was there too, distinct, familiar, and dangerously easy to follow. Edward's face tightened as soon as it hit him. Jasper's posture sharpened. Emmett's jaw clenched. Rosalie's eyes went colder. I kept moving, careful and steady. I didn't move at vampire speed. Not yet. I let the vampires handle the high-speed flanks while I set the trap. Alice's voice was quick in the phone. "She's about 50 yards behind the house," she said. "She's crouched low. She's listening." Jasper's eyes narrowed. "I feel her focus," he murmured, voice barely audible. "It's sharp." Edward whispered, "Victoria," like her name tasted bad. I raised a hand slightly, signaling them to slow. They slowed instantly, which said a lot about how much they trusted the situation even if they didn't trust me. I stepped forward alone. Shadow magic settled around me, not visible as smoke or light, just a shift in how my body registered against the dark. My steps became quieter than the rain. I moved between trees and stopped when I felt the edge of her presence again, cold and hostile like a blade held close. Victoria was there. She was crouched behind a thick trunk, eyes aimed toward the house. Her pale face was still. Her red hair looked darker in the rain. She looked patient, but her body was tight with tension, like she was forcing herself not to rush. Her head turned slightly as I approached, and her eyes locked onto me. Her expression hardened immediately. I lifted 2 fingers in a small wave, cheerful. "You came back fast," I said quietly. She bared her teeth, silent and furious. Edward shifted behind me, barely restrained. Jasper stayed still, ready. Emmett's weight shifted like he wanted to spring. Rosalie's gaze was fixed on Victoria like she was deciding where to tear first. Victoria's eyes flicked past me, toward them, and her expression changed by a fraction. Not fear. Calculation. She moved. Not at me. Past me. A blur through the trees, aimed toward the side of the house where Bella's scent was strongest. Edward lunged after her, faster than anyone else, a streak of pale movement. I moved too. This time I didn't hold back on speed. I reinforced my legs and shifted with shadow, cutting the distance in a way that didn't look human at all. I didn't care if it looked wrong to vampires. They already knew it was wrong. Victoria hit the edge of the yard. Edward was almost on her. Jasper was closing from the right. Emmett was flanking wide, aiming to cut off her exit route. Rosalie moved like a knife, fast and direct. Victoria twisted, trying to use the space between them. I raised my hand. Chain magic snapped into existence across the ground in a tight, low net, positioned ahead of her path rather than around her. It wasn't flashy. It was dark and thin, like wet wire in the rain. Victoria's foot hit it. The chain locked instantly, wrapping her ankle and yanking her balance. She hissed, sharp and furious, and tore upward with brute force. The chain strained and snapped. But not before it slowed her enough. Edward slammed into her from the side, driving her into the mud near the tree line. The impact shook water off branches. Victoria shrieked, a harsh sound that cut through the rain. Charlie's house lights didn't change. No doors opened. Good. Jasper grabbed Victoria's arm, twisting it behind her back in a controlling hold. Emmett got her other side, locking her shoulder. Rosalie moved in and grabbed a handful of Victoria's hair, yanking her head back with cold precision. Victoria snarled, teeth bared. Her eyes locked on Edward with raw hatred. Edward's voice was low and tight. "You," he said, like it was a threat and an accusation. Victoria thrashed, trying to tear free. Her strength was intense, fueled by rage. She twisted enough that Emmett had to brace harder. I stepped in, calm. Victoria's eyes flicked to me again, and her expression tightened with recognition. She remembered the dark blade. She remembered the binding. I smiled faintly. Hi again, I said. Victoria's lips curled back. Her throat vibrated with a low, hostile sound. Edward's gaze snapped to me. Hold her, he said tightly, and he sounded like he wanted to kill her right now. Carlyle wasn't here to calm him. This was all raw instinct and family control. Jasper's voice was low, controlled. We need to be fast, he said. Noise travels. Rosalie's voice was cold. Then finish it, she said flatly. Edward's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to the house, toward Bella inside, then back to Victoria. His expression looked torn between rage and fear. I made the call. Don't, I said evenly. Edward's eyes snapped to me, furious. She tried. I know, I said. My tone stayed calm, but it was firm now. If you destroy her in Charlie's backyard, you make this worse. For Bella. Edward's face tightened with hatred. Jasper's eyes flicked between us, measuring. Emmett kept holding Victoria, jaw clenched. Rosalie's eyes narrowed, clearly offended by restraint. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, like she realized she might live because of the situation, not mercy. Edward's voice was low and shaking with tight control. Then what? He demanded. I stepped closer and lifted my hand again. Dark magic formed along my fingers, controlled, dense. Not glowing. Just wrong. Victoria's eyes locked onto it. This, I said calmly. I pressed the dark edge down, not to cut her apart, but to pin her. The air around her tightened. Her movement stuttered. It wasn't pain like a wound. It was pressure and disruption, like her body couldn't move the way it wanted. Victoria strained anyway, snarling, trying to tear free. I layered sealing magic into the chains still scattered across the ground. The broken pieces responded, rising slightly like they were being pulled by invisible tension, then locking into place around her limbs again. Victoria's thrashing slowed. Jasper exhaled softly, relief flickering in his face for a brief second. Edward stared at Victoria with hard eyes. Why are you doing this? He said, voice tight, directed at her. Victoria didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Her hatred was obvious. Her focus was obvious. Her eyes flicked toward the house again, toward Bella. Edward's face twisted with rage. Rosalie tightened her grip on Victoria's hair. Stop looking at her, Rosalie said coldly. Victoria hissed. Emmett looked at Jasper. Now what? He asked, voice low. Jasper's eyes narrowed. We get her away from the house, he said evenly. Edward's jaw clenched. She'll come back, he said. I know, Jasper replied. I kept my hand raised, maintaining the seal. It took effort, but not enough to strain me. Inside me, the grimoires stayed organized, ready to rotate if she forced a new angle. Move her into the trees, I said calmly. Deep enough that if anything breaks, humans don't hear. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. And then, she asked sharply. And then you can decide how far you go, I said. Edward's eyes flashed, but he didn't argue. He was too focused. We moved as a unit, pulling Victoria backward into the forest. Jasper kept her arm locked. Emmett carried half her weight without effort. Rosalie held her head positioned away from the house like she was controlling an animal. Victoria fought the entire time, but the seal kept her from bursting free. She still snarled and jerked, but she couldn't get traction. When we were far enough into the woods that the house lights were barely visible, Jasper stopped. "Here," he said quietly. Edward stepped in front of Victoria and stared at her face. His expression was hard, controlled, and dangerous. "If you come near her again," he said quietly, "we will destroy you." Victoria's eyes burned with hatred. She didn't look afraid. She looked committed. Rosalie spoke coldly. "You should have left," she said flatly. Emmett's gaze stayed sharp. "Do we pull her apart?" he asked, almost casual, but his body was tense. Jasper's voice was low. "Not here," he said. Edward's jaw clenched. "Not ever," he said, and it sounded like he meant it in a way that had nothing to do with mercy and everything to do with consequences. Victoria's lips curled in a silent sneer. I kept the seal steady and leaned slightly toward Edward, voice low. "We can't end her without making Bella's life smaller," I said evenly. "But we can make her cautious enough that she stops trying to rush the house." Edward's eyes flicked to me, furious. "She'll never stop," he said tightly. "Then we keep stopping her," I replied. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. "That's not a solution," she said sharply. "It is," I said calmly. "It's just not satisfying." Emmett made a low sound of agreement, like he hated that. Jasper watched Victoria's face, eyes narrowed. "She's not thinking about living," he said quietly. "She's thinking about hurting." Edward's eyes went colder. Victoria suddenly twisted hard, putting everything into a burst of strength. The seal strained. I felt it pull. It wasn't breaking yet, but she was forcing it enough that if she kept doing it, she'd find a weak spot. I adjusted instantly, shifting to a different grimoire. Spatial control, minimal. I didn't warp the forest. I didn't open anything. I just shifted Victoria's center of balance by a step, like the ground under her was slightly wrong for her foot placement. She stumbled. Emmett tightened his hold and pinned her again. Rosalie yanked her head back, furious. Victoria hissed, then went still for half a second, eyes wide and calculating. That stillness was the problem. She wasn't giving up. She was planning. Alice's voice suddenly burst through the phone speaker again, fast and sharp. "She's going to bolt," she said. "She's already decided. She's going to use the struggle to slip out. She's going to run toward the river to mask scent." Jasper's head snapped toward the phone. "Now," he said. Victoria moved the instant he spoke, like she'd been waiting for that distraction. She tore sideways with a violent twist, ripping at her own pinned arm. The seal held, but her body moved enough to shift her position, enough to break the angle of Jasper's grip. Jasper reacted immediately, tightening, but Victoria was built for escape when desperate. Emmett lunged to re-grab her. Rosalie snarled and tried to keep hold of her hair. Edward moved like a strike, fast and direct. I didn't hesitate. I called on a heavier chain spell. Not delicate. Not subtle. Just effective. Chain snapped into place around Victoria's torso and legs, locking her against a tree trunk with a hard, tight wrap. Bark cracked. Rain splashed as her body hit the wood. Victoria shrieked, furious. Edward slammed his hand against the chains, eyes wild. "Stop," he snarled, and it was unclear if he meant stop her or stop the whole situation from continuing. Jasper's voice was low and controlled. "Edward," he said sharply. Edward's breathing wasn't real, but his posture looked like someone who was trying to breathe anyway. Victoria thrashed again, but the chains held tighter than before. The anti-magic layer bit into her movement. Her healing stuttered. Rosalie stepped in and looked into Victoria's face with cold disgust. "You're pathetic," she said flatly. Victoria hissed and tried to spit, but Rosalie leaned back just out of reach, expression unchanged. Emmett looked at me, eyebrows raised. Okay, he said quietly. That's a lot. I smiled faintly. I have options, I said cheerfully. Edward glared at me, still furious, but the fury was splitting now between Victoria and the helplessness of not being able to just erase the problem. Jasper's voice was steady. We have her for a moment, he said. What do we do with it? Edward's eyes locked on Victoria. Tell me where you are hiding, he said quietly, deadly calm. Victoria bared her teeth, silent. She won't talk, Rosalie said coldly. Emmett's jaw clenched. We could make her, he said. Carlyle's voice wasn't here to stop that. The restraint came from Jasper's control, and from Edward's awareness of Bella in that house, and from the fact that we couldn't let humans hear anything. I watched Victoria's eyes. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't going to bargain. She was going to keep coming, and she was going to get smarter each time. So I made a different choice. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low, calm, and clear. Listen, I said evenly. You came here to reach Bella. You didn't. You came twice. You failed twice. Victoria's eyes burned into mine. I'm not Edward, I continued. I'm not Carlyle. I'm not here to play rules the way they do. If you keep trying to rush a human house, you'll keep getting stopped. And next time, I'll take something that matters. Victoria's expression tightened. Edward's gaze snapped to me, sharp. What? He demanded, tense. I kept my eyes on Victoria. Her ability to move cleanly, I said calmly. Her legs. Her joints. Her escape routes. Emmett's eyes widened slightly. Rosalie's expression didn't change. Jasper watched me closely, like he was checking whether I meant it. Victoria's eyes flicked, fast, toward the deeper forest, toward the direction she'd chosen in Alice's vision. She understood. She didn't like it. But she understood. Edward's voice was low, strained. You're threatening her, he said. I smiled faintly. Yes, I said. Victoria hissed again, thrashing once, then stopping, like she was choosing her next move carefully. Alice's voice crackled through the phone, still fast. She's still committed, she said. But she's adjusting. She's going to leave now. She's going to run hard and wide. Jasper's eyes narrowed. We can track her, he said quietly. Edward's jaw clenched. We should, he said. Rosalie's voice was cold. Do it, she said. I released the chain slightly, not fully, just enough that Victoria could move if she forced it. She didn't hesitate. The moment the pressure loosened, she tore free with a violent twist, ripping bark and snapping the remaining chain links. She bolted. Edward launched after her instantly. Jasper followed, fast and controlled. Emmett sprang after them with a low growl of effort. Rosalie moved too, her speed sharp and angry, but she kept enough control that the forest didn't explode behind her. I went after them, reinforcing my legs, using shadow to cut distance without making noise that would reach the road. Victoria ran like she didn't care if she tore her own body. She cut through trees and brush, heading toward the river exactly like Alice had said. Edward was closing fast. Jasper stayed angled to cut off. Emmett was a heavy presence behind. Rosalie was a blade to the side. Victoria was still fast enough to keep the gap. I chose a spell that would slow without leaving obvious marks. Gravity magic, minimal. I didn't crush her. I didn't slam her to the ground. I just increased the pull around her for half a second, like the air got heavier and her steps took more effort. Victoria stumbled slightly. Edward almost caught her. She twisted and changed direction again, snarling as she ran, forcing speed through the pressure. I released the gravity and switched back to chains, casting them ahead of her path like trip lines at ankle height. She jumped over one, barely clearing it, then another snapped around her foot midair. She hit the ground hard, rolled, and tore the chain off with brute strength and fury. Edward landed on her again. They crashed into the mud near the river bank, water spraying. Victoria shrieked, and Edward's hands went for her throat like he couldn't stop himself. Jasper grabbed Edward's shoulder instantly. "Edward," he said sharply, "controlled." Edward froze, body shaking with tight restraint. Emmett grabbed Victoria's arm and yanked her away from Edward, holding her with raw strength. Rosalie moved in and pinned Victoria's legs. Victoria snarled and thrashed again, but she was trapped for the second time tonight. The river ran loud beside us, masking sound. Edward stared at Victoria, eyes hard and bright. His voice was low and shaking with control. "Stay away," he said. Victoria's eyes were full of hate. Jasper's voice stayed low. "We can't keep doing this in town," he said. "I know," Edward replied, tight. I stepped closer, rain sliding off my face, tone calm again. "Then we push her out," I said. Rosalie's eyes narrowed. "Out where?" she asked sharply. "Out of Forks," I replied evenly. "You don't need to kill her to move her. You just need to make this place unpleasant to hunt in." Emmett looked at Edward. "We could run her," he said, almost eager. Jasper's eyes narrowed, considering. Edward's posture stayed rigid. "She'll come back," he said again, like he couldn't stop repeating it. "Then we run her again," I replied. Victoria thrashed, then suddenly went still, eyes flicking toward the trees like she was listening to something only she understood. Alice's voice came through the phone, sharp. "She's going to bite her own arm to slip," she said quickly. "She's choosing it." Emmett's eyebrows shot up. "What?" he muttered. Victoria opened her mouth and drove her teeth into her own forearm with brutal force. The sound was wet and sharp. Her body jerked. Emmett flinched despite himself, tightening his hold. Victoria used the moment of shock to twist, ripping skin and muscle to slip her arm partially free. Rosalie snarled and tightened her grip hard enough to crack bone. Victoria shrieked again, but she didn't stop. Edward's face tightened with rage. "Stop," he snarled. Victoria tore free anyway, leaving a piece of herself behind like she didn't care. She launched backward into the trees, fast and wild, and this time none of us were in perfect position to catch her instantly without risking noise. Jasper lunged, missed by inches. Emmett sprang after her and caught only air. Edward chased, faster than before, but Victoria had bought herself a head start and a direction change. I moved too, but I didn't chase deep into unknown territory. Not in Forks. Not with humans nearby and a river that could carry sound. Jasper stopped first, posture tight, listening. Emmett slowed, frustrated. Rosalie came to a halt, eyes flashing with anger. "We should have ended it," she snapped. Edward stood still, staring into the trees where Victoria vanished. His hands were clenched tight. His face looked strained, like he was trying to keep himself from breaking the forest apart. Jasper's voice was low. "She's gone for now," he said evenly. Edward's jaw clenched. "For now," he echoed, tight. I walked up beside Edward, posture calm. "Bella's still alive," I said evenly. Edward's eyes flicked to me, furious and exhausted at the same time. He didn't say thank you. He didn't soften. But he didn't move toward the house in a panic either. He just stood there, rain soaking his hair, staring into darkness, holding himself together through effort. Jasper exhaled slowly, then looked at me. "Your spells worked," he said quietly. I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I replied. Emmett wiped rain off his face and let out a low breath. "She bit herself," he said, half disgusted, half impressed. Rosalie's eyes stayed hard. "She's insane," she said flatly. Jasper's gaze stayed thoughtful. "She's committed," he corrected quietly. Edward turned toward the direction of Charlie's house, face tight. "We go back," he said. We moved again, controlled and quiet, returning through the trees in a way that didn't disturb the neighborhood. When we reached the edge of the yard, Charlie's house still looked normal. No lights flicked on. No doors opened. Bella's scent was still inside, safe. Edward stood at the tree line and didn't move closer. Jasper watched him for a long beat, then spoke quietly. "You did better," he said, controlled. Edward's mouth tightened. "I didn't do anything," he said flatly. "You didn't go to the door," Jasper replied. Edward didn't answer. I kept my tone light, because the tension didn't need to turn into another fight. "Good," I said. "Now we go home, dry off, and do it again when she tries again." Rosalie shot me a cold look. "You talk too much," she said flatly. I smiled at her. "I'm improving," I replied happily. Emmett made a short laugh. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly. Edward didn't laugh. He looked like he was counting every second Bella was behind that door and he wasn't. We left the woods the same way we came, quiet and fast, rain covering everything. Chapter 8, Rotations, Lessons, and a loud detour. We got back to the Cullen house soaked. Edward moved like he wasn't aware of the rain on his clothes at all. Jasper's face stayed controlled, but his eyes looked sharper than usual, like the night had pushed him into a tighter focus. Emmett was annoyed in the way someone gets annoyed when they didn't get to finish a job. Rosalie looked furious, and she didn't bother hiding it. I walked in last, shaking water off my hair with my hands. "Okay," I said cheerfully, "that was a busy evening." Rosalie turned her head slowly, eyes cold. "Don't," she said flatly. I smiled at her anyway. "I won't say it was fun," I replied lightly. "Because it wasn't." Esme appeared from the hallway, her face tight with worry that she tried to keep gentle. "Is Bella safe?" she asked softly. Edward answered immediately, voice tight. "Yes," he said. Esme exhaled, shoulders loosening a fraction. Carlyle stepped in behind her, calm but attentive. Alice came down the stairs quickly, eyes bright and frustrated. "She got away again," Alice said fast. Edward didn't respond. He moved past everyone and stopped near the window, staring into the dark like he could keep guard through the glass. Carlyle looked at all of us with the same steady expression he used when everything was chaotic and he refused to let it show. "All right," he said evenly. "Tell me exactly what happened." "In order." Jasper spoke first, controlled and practical. "She approached Charlie's property," he said quietly. "We intercepted. Kai restrained her twice. She escaped by injuring herself." Emmett snorted. "She tore herself apart to slip," he said with disgusted frustration. Rosalie's mouth tightened. "We should have ended it," she said coldly. Carlyle's gaze flicked to Rosalie, calm but firm. "Not within range of a human house," he replied evenly. Rosalie didn't argue. She just looked angrier, which was her version of acceptance. I leaned back against the wall and lifted one hand. "I used chains, ceiling, and a small spatial shift," I said plainly. "Nothing loud enough to wake Charlie." Alice pointed at me like it bothered her to agree. "It worked," she said quickly, then she frowned. "But she's still going to keep trying." Edward's shoulders tensed hard at that. Jasper's eyes flicked to Edward's profile. Carlyle nodded once. Then we remove her opportunities, he said. Esme stepped closer, voice gentle. We can't keep having fights near Charlie's home, she said softly. I know, Carlyle replied. I pushed off the wall and walked toward the center of the room, still casual, but focused. We need a perimeter, I said. Not just people running when Alice gets a clear decision. A real rotation. Real coverage. Edward's head turned slightly, eyes sharp. He didn't speak. Carlyle's gaze stayed on me. Go on, he said evenly. 3 rings, I said. Outer ring in the forest. Middle ring near the property line. Inner ring is not the house, because that triggers humans. Inner ring is the road and the sight lines. Alice crossed her arms, impatient. And how do we stop her from slipping through a gap? She asked quickly. I smiled faintly. We mark her, I said. Jasper's eyes narrowed. Mark, he repeated. Tracking spell, I said. From a grimoire. I can place it on the ground in a wide pattern or tag it to her if we get contact. Edward finally spoke, voice tight. You could have tagged her tonight. I looked at him calmly. I tried, I said. She escaped before I could set it cleanly. I'm not going to gamble a half mark in town. Edward's jaw clenched. He didn't like it, but he didn't call it wrong. Carlyle's expression stayed composed. We do this properly, he said evenly. Kai, show me what you mean by a wide pattern. Sure, I said happily. Outside. Less furniture. Rosalie rolled her eyes. Emmett muttered, he's right, like it pained him. We went out to the back of the Cullen house where the forest started thick and dark. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, the kind that soaked you slowly. Carlyle stood slightly behind me. Jasper and Edward stood close, both watching me with tight focus. Alice hovered at Carlyle's shoulder, impatient. Esme stayed near the doorway, arms folded, worry in her face. Emmett leaned against a post, watching like he expected a show. Rosalie stood with her arms crossed, looking unimpressed. I took a breath and let my awareness sink inward. I chose a grimoire that handled sensory threads and territory anchors. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a big elemental blast. It was the kind of thing used for hunting and defense. I extended my hand toward the wet ground. Okay, I said, still calm. This is a field anchor. It attaches to movement and pressure shifts. It won't scream. It'll just tell me when something crosses. Edward's eyes narrowed. Tell you how? He asked, tight. I smiled slightly. I'll know, I said. And if I link it, Jasper can feel it as a pattern change, and Alice can get a clearer decision line because the field forces a choice. Alice's eyes widened a fraction. It forces a choice, she repeated quickly. Yeah, I said. It limits the number of clean paths. Jasper's gaze sharpened. That would help, he said quietly. I pressed my palm down toward the soil without fully touching it. Mana moved, controlled, and dense. A faint shift ran across the ground like the wet leaves had been disturbed by something you couldn't see. There was no light. No sound. Just a subtle change in pressure and presence. I stepped back. Outer ring, I said. If someone crosses near the tree line, the field catches it. Emmett squinted like he was trying to see something anyway. I can't see anything, he said. That's the point, I replied cheerfully. Carlyle's expression stayed calm, but his eyes looked impressed in a quiet way. And how long does it last? He asked evenly. Hours, I said. Longer if I refresh it. Edward stared at the ground like he wanted to tear the answer out of it. And it doesn't alert humans, he said, tight. No, I said. Humans don't notice. Rosalie's voice was flat. So it's basically perfect, she said coldly, like she didn't like the idea of anything being perfect when it wasn't hers. It's useful, I replied. Alice leaned forward, restless. Can you do it at Charlie's house? She asked quickly. Yes, I said. Edward's posture tightened. Tonight, he said, voice strained. Carlyle lifted a hand, calm. Not tonight, he said evenly. We're going to do this without letting exhaustion make us sloppy. Edward's eyes flashed. Bella is alone, he said, tight. Esme spoke softly. Charlie is there, she said gently. Edward's jaw clenched harder. He didn't look comforted. I kept my tone light but steady. We'll do it before dawn, I said. Less eyes. Less traffic. Less chance of someone seeing us near his house. Edward's gaze snapped to me. You're going, he said. I nodded. Yeah, I replied. Edward's voice stayed tight. I'm going, he said. Carlyle's expression didn't change. Edward. I'm going, Edward repeated, harder. Carlyle held Edward's gaze for a long moment. He didn't argue in a way that would push Edward into rebellion. Then you go, Carlyle said evenly, and you follow instruction. Edward's jaw clenched. Fine, he said flatly. Jasper's eyes flicked to Edward. You can do that, he said quietly. Edward didn't answer. Back inside, Carlyle shifted from demonstration mode to planning mode. He stood near the dining area, calm, hands folded, and spoke like he was building a schedule for a hospital. 3-ring coverage, Carlyle said evenly. Jasper, Emmett, Rosalie rotations with Edward. Alice remains here to monitor decisions and alert us. Kai will set the field anchors. We do not converge on Charlie's property unless we have to. Alice huffed. I still hate staying here, she said quickly. Carlyle's voice stayed gentle. Your vision is valuable, he said. Alice rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. Edward spoke tightly. I want to learn it, he said, looking at me. I blinked once. Learn what? I asked. How your binding works, Edward said, clipped. How to trap her longer. Jasper's gaze sharpened. That matters, he said quietly. I nodded slowly, then smiled faintly. Okay, I said. But I'm not turning you into a spellcaster. Edward's eyes narrowed. I don't need to cast, he said flatly. I need to understand what you're doing so I can move with it. That was actually reasonable. I tilted my head. Fine, I said. We train coordination. Emmett grinned. Training, he said. Now it's fun. Rosalie shot him a look. Stop, she said coldly. Emmett shrugged, still grinning. We moved into the open space near the living room where there was room to move without smashing things. Jasper stood with his arms loosely crossed, watching me. Edward stood tense, focused, eyes fixed on my hands. Alice perched on the edge of the couch, restless. Carlyle watched calmly like a supervisor. I held up my hand. Chains, I said. They're fast. They can be thrown as lines, nets, or locks. When I add sealing, it becomes harder to brute force. Edward's eyes stayed sharp. An anti-magic, he said, voice tight. I nodded. It interferes with systems, I said. Vampires aren't magic, but you're not human either. It still disrupts the way your body wants to move and heal. Jasper's eyes narrowed. That's why she slowed, he said. Yeah, I replied. Edward's jaw clenched. Show me the timing, he said. Okay, I said. I lifted my hand and snapped a single chain line into place in the air, then released it. It vanished immediately, but the movement pattern stayed in my mind. Chain hits, I said. You get one beat where she's surprised and her balance is off. That's your entry. Jasper cuts her angle. Emmett blocks her exit. You don't tackle her straight unless you're sure she can't slip sideways. Edward's eyes narrowed. She slips sideways, he said, voice tight. Yeah, I said. So don't give her sideways. Jasper spoke quietly. We need a funnel, he said. I smiled. Exactly, I replied. You don't chase in a line. You shape the space. Alice leaned forward. Can you shape it without her seeing it? She asked quickly. Yes, I said. Field anchors and path limits. But those take seconds to lay cleanly. Edward's voice was tight. Then we give you the seconds, he said. That's the idea, I replied. We ran it in practice without breaking the house. I cast short-lived chain lines in the air as visual reference for them. Jasper moved with controlled precision, stepping into angles rather than rushing. Edward moved too aggressively at first, too direct, because he was Edward. He wanted to hit the problem until it stopped existing. I corrected him as we went. Don't lunge like you're angry, I said calmly. Lunge like you're solving. Edward's eyes flashed. I am solving, he said tightly. I smiled faintly. You're punching, I replied. Jasper's mouth twitched slightly. Alice made a quick sound that might have been a laugh. Edward glared at them, then forced himself to reset, shoulders tightening and then settling into control. We did it again. Better. Carlyle watched without speaking much, only stepping in when Edward's intensity started to push toward losing control. Carlyle didn't scold. He just redirected with quiet authority. After an hour, Edward looked the same on the outside, but I could tell he was absorbing the timing. Jasper already understood it naturally. Edward was forcing himself to learn it through stubbornness, which was still learning. Alice suddenly stiffened again. Her head tilted. Her eyes unfocused. Her fingers tightened on the couch cushion. Jasper's posture changed instantly. Alice, he said quietly. Edward turned sharply. What? He demanded. Alice inhaled quickly. She's doing something else, she said fast. Victoria. She's not going for Charlie's right now. Edward's jaw clenched. Where? He asked, voice tight. Alice blinked hard. In town, she said. Near the road by the gas station. She's going to cause a distraction. She's trying to pull you away from Bella. Carlyle's expression sharpened. A human target, he said evenly. Alice nodded quickly. Yes, she said. A truck. A driver. She's planning to push it into traffic. Edward moved immediately. I'm going, he said. Carlyle held up a hand. Edward, he said calmly. We split. Edward's eyes flashed. No, he said tightly. We have to, Carlyle replied evenly. Bella must remain covered. And we cannot allow a human death. Edward's jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. Jasper spoke low. I'll stay near Charlie's, he said. Emmett too. Rosalie can hold the outer ring. Emmett nodded, already moving. Done, he said. Rosalie's eyes narrowed, irritated at being assigned instead of choosing. Fine, she said flatly. Carlyle looked at me. Kai, he said evenly. You go to town. Stop the human incident. I nodded. Yeah, I said. Edward snapped his gaze to Carlyle. I'm going with him, he said tight. Carlyle held Edward's gaze. Then you follow him, Carlyle said calmly. No loud confrontation. No attention. Edward's hands clenched. Fine, he said again. Alice spoke quickly. She wants the noise, she said. She wants the police and the lights. She wants Charlie distracted. She wants Bella's house less watched. I know, I said calmly. Alice's eyes narrowed. Stop saying that, she snapped again. I smiled faintly. No, I replied happily, then I got serious as I moved. Stay on it, Alice. Tell Jasper if she changes direction. Alice nodded, tense. Go, she said. Edward and I left immediately. The rain hit us again. Edward drove faster than a human would, but not so fast that headlights would draw attention. His control was tight, but I could feel how badly he wanted to go straight to Charlie's house instead. You're thinking about Bella, I said calmly. Edward's jaw clenched. Of course, he said tightly. She's covered, I said. You don't know that, he snapped. I kept my tone steady. Jasper and Emmett are there, I said. Rosalie is outer ring. Alice is watching. She's not alone. Edward didn't answer. His grip on the wheel stayed hard. When we reached town, it looked normal at first. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement. A couple cars moved through the intersection. The gas station sign glowed faintly. Then I felt the shift. Not through scent. Through pattern. A sharp, predatory intent moving against normal human flow. I narrowed my focus and scanned the area. A pickup truck was pulling out of the gas station. The driver looked tired. Head slightly down, hands steady on the wheel, just a person trying to get home. On the far edge of the lot, near the darker side where the light didn't reach fully, I saw her. Victoria. She stood too still. Too poised. Her pale skin and red hair were obvious even in the rain. She looked like she belonged in the dark, and she was watching the truck like it was an object, not a person. Edward stiffened beside me. Victoria, he said low. His voice was tight enough that it sounded like a warning. Victoria's head turned slightly, and her eyes locked onto us. Her expression shifted into irritation, then into something sharper. Not fear. Planning. She moved. Not toward us. Toward the truck. She shot across the wet pavement in a blur, aiming for the back quarter of the vehicle. A hard shove at the right angle could send it into the intersection. A crash would draw police, lights, attention, panic. Edward lunged instinctively. I grabbed his sleeve for a fraction of a second, holding him back just enough to keep him from moving like a missile in plain sight. Controlled, I said sharply, low. Edward's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't rip away. He forced himself to follow my lead. I moved. Shadow magic slid under my steps. Reinforcement tightened my body. I crossed the distance fast enough that no human eye would track it clearly, but not so fast that it looked like teleporting under streetlights. Victoria's hand reached the truck. I cast. Chain magic snapped across the pavement like thin, dark lines that hooked around her ankles and yanked. She stumbled, her hand grazing the truck instead of striking it cleanly. The truck jolted slightly, but the driver kept control, looking confused, not panicked. Victoria snarled, low and vicious, and tore at the chains. Edward moved in from the side, fast and silent, and slammed into her, driving her behind the gas station where the building blocked most sight lines. I followed instantly. Behind the building, the light was dimmer. The rain sounded louder in the enclosed space. Victoria twisted out of Edward's grasp like she'd been built for slipping. Edward's hand snapped for her again. His face was hard, eyes bright with rage. Victoria's eyes flicked toward the street. She was still thinking about the human chaos. I didn't let her. I pressed sealing magic down around her feet, pinning her to the slick ground. It wasn't a dramatic slam. It was a heavy lock. Her movement hit resistance and stuttered. Victoria hissed, furious. Edward struck, fast and controlled enough not to crack the wall. He hit her hard enough to stagger her back, but not enough to start a fight that would leave damage visible from the street. He was learning. Jasper would have approved if he could see it. Victoria snarled and snapped her teeth, trying to get close enough to bite. Edward jerked back, disgust flashing in his face. I layered anti-magic into the seal, and her healing and motion slowed again, just enough to keep her from bursting free. Victoria's eyes burned with hatred as she stared at me. I smiled faintly, still calm. "This isn't working for you," I said evenly. Victoria's lips curled back. Edward's voice was tight. "Where is she?" he demanded, like he wanted Victoria to answer for the universe. Victoria didn't speak. A car passed out front. Voices drifted from the gas station door as a couple people stepped out briefly, then went back in. We didn't have time to tear her apart. We didn't have time to argue. I chose the practical outcome. I cast a tracking mark directly onto her. Not visible as a glowing symbol. It was a pressure thread that attached to her movement signature. It was the kind of mark meant for hunting something fast through a forest. I felt it lock. Victoria felt it too. Her expression changed into immediate alarm. She surged hard against the seal, snapping it with a violent twist. The chains strained. One broke. Then another. Edward lunged again, trying to keep her pinned, but Victoria used the tight space and the rain-slick ground to slip past him and bolt toward the alley exit. I moved with shadow and cut her off at the corner, forcing her to veer. She shot out into the darker lot behind the building, then into the tree line beyond town. Edward started to chase. I caught his arm again. "Not through town," I said sharply, low. Edward's eyes flashed. His whole body looked like it wanted to ignore me. Then he forced himself still, breathing control into the moment like it hurt. Victoria was already gone into the trees. But the mark remained. I could feel it pulling faintly in my awareness like a thread stretching away. Edward stared into the darkness, jaw clenched. "She's running," he said, tight. "Yes," I replied calmly. "And now we can follow without guessing." Edward's eyes narrowed. "You marked her," he said. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "That's what I wanted last night." Edward's jaw clenched harder. He looked furious, but it wasn't directed fully at me. It was anger at the fact that the world was forcing him to use restraint and strategy instead of brute force. Police lights didn't appear. The truck didn't crash. The town stayed normal. That mattered. We returned to the car and drove back toward Charlie's area, not to confront, but to confirm coverage and report. Alice called while we were driving. Her voice was fast and tight. "She changed," she said. "She failed at town. She's retreating. She's angry. She's marked," I said. There was a short silence. "You did it," Alice said quickly. "Yes," I replied. Jasper's voice cut in on another line, calm and controlled. "We maintained coverage at Charlie's," he said. "No approach. Bella is still inside. Charlie is still inside." Edward's shoulders loosened by a fraction, relief slipping out in his posture before he locked it back down. I kept my tone light. "Good," I said. We stopped the human incident, and we tagged her. That's a productive night. Edward didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the road, but his hands weren't shaking now. His control looked tighter, more deliberate. When we arrived back near Charlie's place, we didn't go to the house. We met Jasper and Emmett in the trees. Rosalie stayed on the outer edge, visible only as a pale shape between trunks when she moved. Jasper stepped closer, voice low. You prevented the human collision, he said evenly. Yeah, I replied. Emmett's eyebrows lifted. And you marked her, he said, impressed. I nodded. Tracking thread, I said. I can feel her direction now. Not perfectly, but enough. Rosalie's voice came cold from the shadows. So we hunt her, she said. Carlyle arrived a moment later, moving calm and fast, eyes scanning. Alice was with him, tense but energized. Carlyle looked at me. You placed the mark, he said evenly. Yes, I replied. Carlyle nodded once. Good, he said. That changes our options. Edward's jaw clenched. We go now, he said tightly. Carlyle's gaze held Edward's. We go when we can do it without leaving Bella uncovered, he said calmly. Edward's face tightened again, but he didn't explode. He was learning to hold himself back because he had to.